And now, on with the show.
So hello everyone, my name is Nadav Gilboa, and I'm the creator, lead organizer, master of ceremonies, and grand high poobah of this event. Don't judge me, they said I could choose my own titles. Me and the rest of my team have been working very hard to make this happen. Who's the rest of my great and helpful team, you might ask? Well, she's somewhere in the audience. Before we start, I want to say a few thank yous. Trust me, there will be more later. But we want to get started, so these are just for our sponsors. Our very first thank you comes with a short story. This thank you goes out to Mr. Eitan Winkle, who is probably somewhere here. He donated at our spare change level. He donated a whopping $2. This may not seem like much. It did get the ball rolling. Soon after, we started talking with our more substantial donors. A big thank you to all of those organizations who made this event possible. Thank you to Awesome Pittsburgh, the Teen Funders Initiative, Cyber Smile US and UK, the Grable Foundation, Media 2x3, and Shannon Gregg, Public Speaker. Now that we're finished with that, let's get started with the main event. Our very first speaker is a very noteworthy guy. Thank you to sponsors. He's a very noteworthy guy. He's a fourth-year architecture student, as well as a minor in business studies at Carnegie Mellon University. He also stops me from being the only creator of a TEDx event here. He is co-president, co-founder of TEDx CMU, and is the innovation curator of TEDx Pittsburgh. He's a great mentor of mine and has been very generous with both material and knowledge. He has just recently traveled to his 40th country. He's a great story, and after he watches a scary movie, he's afraid a ghost will eat his feet. Please help me welcome the one, the only, Jay Kanodia.
Potato chips. Good fun, or so I had hoped. Every day, people around the world consume millions of bags of potato chips. Little did I know that one innocuous bag of chips would define my transition from childhood to adulthood. In my high school, no iPods allowed, no outside food, and no launching signs pervade the creme-colored walls of the institution. Rules defined life at school. Unforeseen monthly bag checks were the norm. In the words of my principal, success followed those who obeyed willingly. I came up with a small, nifty math equation. Doesn't make too much sense, does it? Let me explain. It was a sultry August morning in Kolkata, a small metropolitan city on the southeast coast of India where I was born and raised. As school head boy, it fell upon me to conduct the monthly bag check. The prefect body and I spread out across the school, checking bags and lockers, while the students lined the corridors outside the classrooms. Amidst all the muffled voices, one suddenly stood out. The boy in question was all of 16 years old. He quietly stood next to me and confessed on having a bag of potato chips in his locker. Against my better judgment, I did not confiscate the bag of chips. Later, word in the air was that something wrong was not confiscated in the classroom that I had checked. The class was rechecked by school officials. Following the official inspection, I was summoned to the principal's office and was accused of forgiving the presence of an iPod. I was shocked. I honestly confessed on not having confiscated a bag of potato chips, but the authorities insisted on the existence of an iPod, the presence of which, till date, has not been conclusively proven. An avalanche of unpleasant circumstances followed. My parents were called to school. In an emergency prefect body meeting, I was berated and debadged. I felt humiliated. It felt like a mountain was being made out of a molehill. And adding insult to the injury, they offered to return the badge to me if I honestly confessed on having carelessly left the iPod. I refused to confess to a crime I had not committed, choosing to keep the remnants of my pride over that once coveted, hard-won badge. I have always been rather idealistic. This incident taught me to have an unwavering commitment to my conscience. It taught me the value of resilience. But most importantly, it taught me how to bear up to failure and disappointment. My parents did give me the option of switching schools. While I was having a difficult time at school, I decided that quitting was not an option. It was hard too at first, but I submitted to the stares and whispers, telling myself it would all pass away. I saw the change in myself through the change in the way I was treated at home. Choosing to remain at school was the first big decision that was left completely up to me. From there on, bigger decisions began rolling in. It was in this time that I had the conversation with my parents about studying abroad. Again, the final decision was left completely up to me. I was trusted with taking my little sister and 12 of her friends out on a birthday lunch. Think about the number of things that could have gone wrong with 13 12-year-olds in a public restaurant. But more importantly, for the first time ever, my father began asking for my opinions. I have never been afraid of responsibility, but I realized that I was now way more willing to hold myself accountable. And to me, accountability had become the definition of adulthood. A month later, I was reinstated head boy and was told that the decision was prompted by the maturity with which I handled the situation. I accepted the badge, knowing that was the closest I would get to an apology. But by then, that badge meant way less than it would have, and a bag of potato chips or an iPod meant way more than it should have. This incident formed the grounds of my common application essay and got me into Carnegie Mellon for architecture. Coming to freshman year, I always assumed myself an extrovert and thought that fitting in would not be the slightest of my problems. Well, I was wrong, very wrong, and it was hard. And amidst my desperate struggle of trying to fit in, what did I do? I joined Greek life. You know how they all say that if you want to have a fun life, a social life, you want to fit in, all you have to do is join Greek life? Well, I can tell you, they are absolutely wrong. It was a great 1 year at my fraternity until I saw the very people for whom I joined graduate in front of my eyes. It made me realize that I was in love with meeting new people, but not any other aspect of it. So I went inactive, but I did not lose hope. And sooner than I knew, I got an offer to be an Andrew ambassador for Carnegie Mellon. As an ambassador, I would give campus tours, sit on student panels, represent CMU. My heart would jump up and down, showing off the pride I had for this amazing institution I was honored to be a part of. This one time, a student even sent me a postcard in my mailbox saying that he loved my campus tour and that I played a huge role in him deciding to come to Carnegie Mellon. I could not help but get teary-eyed. This is when I finally started feeling like I had gotten a grasp over university life in the United States. One fine day, over the spring semester of my freshman year, as I sat and thought, I realized that all I had done all year was spread new ideas and connect people on intellectual grounds. It was nothing more than me with 2 of my friends sitting in a room and exclaiming, "You know what? We should start a TEDx CMU on campus." And you know what? We did. There I sat as a co-founder of TEDx CMU. Coming to sophomore year, 3 huge things happened. Number 1, I started getting conscious about my looks and lost 100 pounds in just 8 months. Number 2, my personality growth got me the position of the coordinator of the Andrew Ambassador program, where with the help of 3 of my other co-workers, we oversaw and led the team of 40 ambassadors. And number 3, we successfully executed our first TEDx CMU event. It was a limited capacity 100% event, which we had spent 1 year planning, slogging, fighting, struggling. But what disappointed us the most was that even after all this effort, we had somehow not sold out. We were really upset, but we refused to give up. And we were ready to take on the new year with a lot of stride and ready to do this event even better the next time. During my junior year, I realized that losing weight had gone to my head. I was malnourished, skinny, would faint at least once a week, and would feel dizzy a couple of times every day. For that past year, I had deprived myself of any form of fat, fried, sugar, or anything that would make my weight go up by even a single gram. My doctors told me that my blood tests were all haywire, and if I did not fix my life, it would have consequences on my coming future. This scared me a lot. After that, I started going to the gym, but not for cardio, to lift weights. And here I am in front of you, not malnourished, gaining 20 more pounds in just pure muscle. During that year, we also scaled up TEDx CMU to a 600-person event. And this time, we sold out in just 1 week. Keep in mind, this is only the second time this team was pulling together a TEDx event. The sheer scale of the event did not hit us till the day off. But what I can tell you is that when you see 445 people walking out the double doors of a packed auditorium, you know that the hard work has paid off. This brings us to September of 2017, my senior fall. Scared that being a fourth-year architecture student, I did not get the professional development I needed to succeed in the industry. I felt ashamed that I could not distinguish a business formal attire from a business casual attire. I would have to double-check details with someone every time I dressed up. So I decided to rush a professional on-campus co-ed business organization. It was a 2-week commitment rushing this business organization. Turns out, I did not get an invitation to join. I was disheartened, but in the process, made a lot of great friends. What stuck with me the most was that during the final round of interviews, when I showed my resume to the panel, the comments they made were that the resume was unprofessional, not up to the mark, and was not worthy of industry standard. This was the same resume that had been reviewed and assessed by my mentors, advisors, professors, etc., etc. What this taught me was that you never let anyone decide for you whether you're worth it or not. That is one decision you make for yourself. And the answer should always be that yes, you are worth it. I refused to give up hope. And a couple of days later, I got an offer to be on the working committee of TEDx Pittsburgh. People often tell you that hard work is the only thing you need to succeed. They are yet again wrong. Friends and family are as important as hard work is. In high school, I was that popular kid. I knew everyone, everyone knew me. But amidst that desperate struggle of trying to be popular, I lost all my true friends. Friends who would have been there for me no matter what. When it came to college, I did flip my life, but for the worse, not for the better. I became someone who started using sarcasm as a defense mechanism. And of course, who other than Chandler Bing could have inspired me? It just somehow seemed easier to be funny and sarcastic than have myself open up to people and then go through the emotional pain of seeing them slip away in front of my eyes. And I stand here today with no regrets. I am nothing but a collage of mistakes. Even though I keep people away from getting close to me, I proudly have friends from almost every country in this world. Even though I didn't lose 100 pounds and got malnourished, I gained 20 more back in pure muscle. Even though I've been denied memberships and leaderships to a bunch of on-campus and off-campus organizations, today I am proud that I've been to 40 countries and met people from all over, and picked up a new language this summer working off the Guatemalan streets. I will not tell you that it's going to be easy, because it's not. But what I can tell you is that it will not be impossible. Steve Jobs is one individual I have always looked up to. And he always said, you can never connect the dots looking forwards. You can only connect them looking backwards. And that's what makes all the difference. In hindsight, everything I just told you in the past 10 minutes would sound like random stories until they were seen in a series of one action informing the other. Einstein, he had his eureka moment. I had my potato chip moment. And trust me, you will have yours too. So I want to end with 3 quick life lessons. Number 1, you will make mistakes, but embrace them with passion and overcome them to prove to the world that you, as humanity, as an individual, as a society, are capable of doing the best. Number 2, you make mistakes, but you fight and struggle. You do not sit around waiting, because opportunities do not come in a silver platter. And number 3, you can either choose to focus on what's tearing you down or what's keeping you together. I made my decision, and it's time for all of you to make yours. All you have to do is find your potato chip and iPod. Thank you.
Great job, Jay. That was really inspiring. Our next talk is actually not from one of our speakers. It's a pre-recorded official TED Talk given by the popular YouTuber Kid President.
I think we all need a pep talk. The world needs to stop being boring. Yeah, you. Boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. And if life is a game, are we on the same team? I mean, really, right? I'm on your team, be on my team. This is life, people. You got air coming through your nose. You got heartbeat. That means it's time to do something. A poem. Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. It hurt, man! Really bad. Rocks, thorns, and glass. My parts broke. Wah! Not cool, Robert Frost. But what if there really were two paths? I want to be the one that leads to awesome. It's like that dude Journey said, don't stop believing unless you dream stupid. Then you should get a better dream. I think that's how it goes. Get a better dream and keep going. Keep going, keep going, and keep going. Will Michael Jordan have quit? Well, he did quit. So he retired. Yeah, that's he retired. But before that, in high school, what if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. And I love Space Jam. What will be your Space Jam? What will you create will make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. If we're all on the same team, let's start acting like it. We got work to do. We can cry about it, or we can dance about it. We were made to be awesome. Let's get out there. I don't know everything. I'm just a kid. But I do know this. Because everybody's doing to give the world a reason to dance. So get to it. You've just been pep talk. Create something that will make the world awesome. Play ball.
I hope you all enjoyed that video. Our next speaker is a pretty remarkable person. So remarkable, in fact, that she's been honored with as one of 14 remarkable women of the arts in New Hampshire Magazine. And yet, she somehow still has time to be an author, a public speaker, a storyteller, an innkeeper, and a mother of 3 teenagers. She uses both comedy and exhaustive researching to engage with audiences about making good and honorable choices online and in general. And she lived in a treehouse for 2 months with her kids once. Please help me welcome the amazing Cindy Pierce.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. The world I hope for is one where kids and young people, I'm going to start over. Sorry. The world I hope for is a place where kids and young people feel that they can ignore the unspoken and unfair social rules that are put out there and find the social courage to speak up for for themselves, as well as be engaged bystanders who speak up for others. So gaining our social courage, it starts with getting conviction in what you believe and what your values are. And a lot of people go through life and they think suddenly social courage is just going to land on them eventually, it'll just happen. But in reality, it is a practice of listening to your heart and questioning norms and sometimes enduring painfully awkward moments. Now, the thing about awkwardness is that we all try to avoid it, right? But if you're willing to dive into awkward soup, swim to the other side, get out and shake yourself off, it's then you realize that you survived and you gain another layer of social courage. Now, we're all complicated, multidimensional people, but social media doesn't always capture all of those dimensions, right? A lot of people spend time cultivating their image online, and sometimes it's fully fabricated. Sometimes it's slightly exaggerated. And most of the time, it just highlights the most amazing parts of life. And that can be really stressful because sometimes your reality doesn't really align with what you put out there. And it's also hard because if you're someone who's, scrolling through people's posts and people's, lives, seeing their lives, you start to compare yourself and feel inadequate. So that can be really an anxiety, causing situation. And it really takes social courage to put your true self out there online and not worry about or even obsess about how people are going to react or if they react at all. And it can be really tricky to navigate friendships with people who constantly seek validation online. And for someone who's so desperate for praise, there's no amount of comments or likes that will fill that void for them, right? And, people put the sexy pictures out there and get the usual comments, hot, gorge, goals, so cute, and I hate you, heart, 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 heart. And if you're the kid who didn't respond, sometimes your friend will find you and be like, so why didn't you comment on my post or at least like it? So you get all this feedback, right? So it can be a full-time job keeping the praise junkie fed. Now, by keeping a balance on how we use devices and social media, we can, cultivate great friendships and healthy relationships and also stay grounded. But this array of social media platforms makes it possible to really avoid developing social courage. And with your peers as the referees on social media, microaggressions tend to be tolerated. A lot of people feel free to make comments that are racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, just to name a few. And those are places where people really feel like that's where you want to show social courage. Now, having social courage is not about being an extrovert. We all know those shy, more introverted friends who are so strong and have clear boundaries, and they don't speak up much, but when they do, we all listen, right? All of a sudden they assert themselves and drop this huge wisdom bomb, and we're all like, yes, preach it. But putting aside your fear of rejection or your fear of exclusion to confront someone in person, that's a challenging thing, but it's worth aiming for. And if you're not there yet, speaking up online is perfectly acceptable as well. So harassment and bullying, that certainly happens on social media, for sure. But really, most of the time, it's really more about subtle forms of harshness, underhanded jabs and snarky comments, and sometimes fully mean comments followed by a just kidding. So there's the mop up afterwards. A lot of kids talk about being left out of group chats, or they were in a group chat and then the group makes a new group chat and only leaves them off, and they kind of wonder, well, what was the reason? And they assume it's some unspoken rule that they weren't playing by, right? And with the distance of using our phones, we have the emotional distance and safety. So we don't really, have to practice social courage because we don't have to be held accountable for what we say and do face to face. And when you do confront someone courageously and call them out for being offensive, sometimes you pay a consequence, right? People write all these negative comments publicly, shamed, but not saying something, that is what can feel unsettling. And, with that feeling of that you didn't say something, that should inspire you to, aim to dive in that soup and swim to the other side. So when we start building social courage, the first thing is to witness other people who have it and who demonstrate it. And so with positive role models who are showing social courage in all forms, that's when we can start developing a plan for how we're going to start practicing. And I want you to think right now in your own minds, take a moment and think about a situation or someone who was socially courageous. And think about, how did people react? What did it feel like? What did it look like? And how did it make you feel to witness it? So I had the good fortune of growing up marinated in social courage. I mean, look at this clan of fashion enemies right here, 1979. That's me in the corner. I was crying because they wouldn't let me wear my baseball cap because it might ruin the family picture. I beg to differ that I think there's a lot of things contributing to a sketchy picture, but I hear them. Anyway, so these people, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and my parents and my siblings were all righteous nonconformists. And they made cringeworthy moments a regular occurrence in my life. And I remember if we were going out in public, sometimes I'd say to my parents, do you think maybe you could just kind of blend here, like hoping? And my father, he had no patience for such nonsense. He would be like, too many people in the world, blend and behave. Find the courage to be your own person. Now, my mother, she was no slack in that department either. Even the smallest injustice, she couldn't help herself. She had to speak up. I remember on multiple occasions going to the grocery store with her as a kid, and we'd be about to pull into a parking spot, and someone would like go in front of her and take her spot. She'd throw that car and park, calmly get out, go around, knock on the window. Oh my gosh. And something about her bold conviction, people would back their car out and give her spot. But imagine my sister and I are crouched down in the car, horrified, totally horrified. And after grocery shopping, on the way home, we would pepper her with a lot of feedback on how she could have handled that situation differently. With a wave of the hand, she would say, "Don't be ridiculous, girls. What would happen to that man if no one told him that he was rude? Besides, being embarrassed is good for the soul." So part of my social courage training involved frequent reminders that you can be a nice person who's also polite, but as you're also can be fierce when someone crosses your boundaries and assertive, right? Like that is an important lesson. So in middle school and high school, I would speak up for things that I cared about. By the time I got to college, I grew more comfortable speaking up and, holding people accountable when they were rude or offensive. And if people made disparaging comments about women, I'd step right up and let them know what I thought, even though they would try to silence me. There was always someone who would be like, "What are you, some kind of feminist?" I'd be like, as a matter of fact, I am, as we all should be. And, I think if my lack of compliance would repel that person and offend them so much, that kind of confirmed that my natural social filters were working quite well. And so for young people, think about what bugs you, what offends you or hurts your feelings online and off. And if people don't want to be around you because you're speaking your truth, trust your repellents and move them right along. So once we start building social courage, the next step is to reinforce it in our communities. And think about what it would be like if it was a norm for people to call out online cruelty, if that was a norm. What if people supported other people who were socially courageous, right? And what would it look like if what would it look like if we reinforce that everywhere we went with our friends? And how would it be if everyone felt perfectly free to be their authentic self online and off? So it is up to us to recognize, to build, to practice and spread social courage. The world I hope for is a place that supports you to muster social courage and speak up for what matters and for what you know is right in your heart. Thank you.
done, Ms. Pierce. As a person with quite a few social media accounts myself, I'll try my best to remember this talk. Our next speaker has done some pretty amazing things recently. She's a sophomore at one of the biggest high schools in the area, Taylor Alderdice, and there she started something revolutionary. She's always been interested with political, economic, and social issues. She decided to act on that interest, and she founded the Global Minds Initiative. It is student-led, and its goal is to bridge English as a second language, or ESL students, and native English-speaking, or NES students. She's also president of CISV's Pittsburgh Junior Board, vice president of Generations to Generations, a youth advisory committee member for Pittsburgh Cares, and so many other things we didn't have time to list them. She's been featured on the Today Show, Fox News, Teen Vogue, the New York Times, and she can say hello in 17 languages. Please help me welcome the inspiring Peyton Klein.
On the very first day of middle school, I remember being terrified and overwhelmed by the newness of the faces in the environment. At lunch, 10 of my new friends and I all squeezed together at a table that only sat 6. The teachers, noticing this pattern, announced over the loudspeakers, 6 students at a big table and 4 students at a small table. Suddenly, the room went silent, every student all awkwardly and nervously looking at each other, seeing who would move first. This whole ordeal turned into an exhausting game of musical chairs. The bell would ring, we would all dart down 9 flights of stairs and compete for a seat at one of these tables. The teachers would actually come over and make us go move to sit alone. So flash forward 3 grades in a new school later, I found myself in my freshman homeroom when I overheard a conversation between my homeroom teacher and an unfamiliar classmate. I realized that this girl had been sitting behind me for the whole year, but I didn't know her name, let alone anything about her. I made the incorrect assumptions that simply because she wore a hijab and always sat quietly, that she didn't speak English. Now something was missing. I was politically active, I campaigned, I knocked on doors, I believed in equality and inclusion, but I wasn't actually living it. So I approached this girl and I learned her name was Khawla. And in addition to learning her name, I learned of her incredible story of refuge from Syria. We began speaking every day, and I now had this new friend, one who was so kind, so warm, so diligent and smart. I went to her birthday party. We shared in our culture and music. Our friendship enriched both of our lives, and I couldn't help but think of the other unfamiliar classmates I was missing out on, and who my peers were missing out on. I deeply regretted not meeting Khawla sooner. I missed out on so many months of laughter, kindness, and friendship. Regret must come with action. Khawla shared with me her negative experience in high school thus far. She faced several instances of cultural intolerance and discrimination, and it wasn't good enough for me to just put my arm around her and say, it's gonna be okay. What about the other students facing these experiences? How could we turn those into good ones? There are 4.9 million English as a second language students in the United States. That makes up approximately 10% of every student body. What about them? I had to not only put my arm around Khawla, but around the community and the student body, not just to comfort, but to change the experience that they faced. I brainstormed with my English as a second language classmates. How can we create more friendships like Khawla and mine? 2 innovative teachers lent their room for a think tank. The conversations I was lucky enough to have with my English as a second language classmates changed me forever. I learned of their rich culture, experience, and knowledge, but also their pain and unimaginable struggles. There was Isra, who fled Iraq from Al-Qaeda, to Syria to flee Syria from ISIS, to Alderdice High School, to be a scientist who can and will change the world. There's Valeria, who came from a struggling Venezuela, a passionate lover of physics and pigs. There's Alexis from the Philippines, Sarah from Saudi Arabia, Uliana from the Ukraine. They can make anybody smile. Puya from Iran, Albra from Saudi Arabia, 2 of the kindest guys I've ever met who defy all stereotypes. Daniela, a first-generation American whose parents are from Serbia and Macedonia. truly the smartest person I have ever met. And each unique student had something important to share. I needed to hear these stories. My classmates needed to hear these stories. The world needed to hear these stories. And I didn't realize it at the time, but through those conversations, I was humanizing the meaning of immigrant and refugee in my brain. I grew up in a liberal household, and I believed in accepting immigrants and refugees, but I was never in a space where I could develop an educated opinion based upon real people. In order to develop the next generation of leaders, voters, and Americans, we must humanize issues, talk to communities, and listen to their stories. And with this group of brave and amazing students, I helped develop an outlet to do just that. We developed an after-school program called Global Minds. Global Minds bridges native English-speaking students and English as a second language students through activities about human rights, diversity, sustainable development, and international relations. That's all paired with conversational English practice to act as an educational support system for ESL students and to better educate native English-speaking students in order to create more globally minded young leaders. So what does that look like? Khawla and I are paired up, and through our intercultural friendship, I'm overcoming stereotypes and discrimination, and she can receive homework help or support navigating the school system. And through that connection, we're becoming the next generation of globally minded young leaders. Over the next year, we engaged students from 25 different countries who speak 16 different languages and over 30 hours of 100% student-led programming. We painted a mural at the Wilkins Community Center representing immigration and unity, illustrating our stories with a local artist. We went to the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh, had an experiential learning day, talked to their executive director, ate lunch with their community, went to their call to prayer, and overcame Islamophobia head-on. We plastered the walls of Alderdice High School with posters representing countries typically portrayed negatively in the media. We had a global potluck, shared food, danced, honored each other, and invited our families to do the same. We developed global friendships. We talked about current events. We experienced the Trump administration's first travel ban. We smiled, we laughed, we cried, because that ban did in fact impact our students. We developed empathy and compassion so we could not only support each other as neighbors, but as friends. And suddenly, the most important part of the program began to shine through. As students were developing intercultural friendships, they started gaining confidence. And the power went from me solely leading meetings to students volunteering, stepping up, saying, I want to take a part in this. And Pittsburghers, teenagers, started making a change in our community, which can now be reflected all throughout the world. And the word got out about it. We appeared on the Today Show. We shared our stories in the New York Times and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We emphasized the importance of student voice in Teen Vogue. And teachers and students from all across the country and the world started reaching out. How can we start this program in our community? And we could have never imagined the magnitude of those requests. Teachers and students in every community, communities we didn't even know existed, started reaching out. The social and academic disconnect between native English-speaking students and English as a second language students was apparent in every community. We responded to those requests with an 100% student-led curriculum, the resources, guidance, and platform for them to start this program at their school. Now, with over 450 students across 6 states, 11 schools, and 3 countries, I now help lead a movement of kindness, inclusivity, and welcoming. Everything from grant writing to program development to tax forms, which are very hard, by the way, are done by passionate and compassionate youth. Khawla and I sat every morning freshman year doing math, science, history homework. And at the beginning, we were strangers, bonding over our disinterest in the quadratic formula and photosynthesis. But as the year went on, we grew together, and she taught me the power of education. Khawla shared with me one morning this year that she didn't think she could be a lawyer because someone told her it would be too hard, simply because she wore a hijab. Now, I was very upset at this, so I took out my phone and I Googled Muslim lawyers, and tons of people showed up that just looked like her. Now, think about that. A human being looking in Khawla's eyes and saying, you can't. Now, Khawla will be whatever she wants to be because Khawla is incredible. And being incredible doesn't come from the color of your skin or whatever you wear on your head. It comes from your heart. And Khawla has one of those like none other. Khawla changed my life. Life is exclusive. It's all about being chosen, being selective. But it's essential to our humanity that we create spaces for everyone, especially in high school. We started Global Minds on Tuesday at Alderdice for our second year, and we had 84 students show up. That is a very big space. That is a very long table, but it's worth pulling up a couple chairs, scooching together to make sure everyone fits. We can all learn from each other. Conversations change minds, and changed minds change the world. So let me bring it back to my story about middle school. You know the kid that didn't always have a seat at the table? A lot of times I was that kid. I know how it feels. And at some point in your life, you have felt that pain of exclusion or longing to belong. You know how it feels. So the next time you're in the lunchroom, whether that applies to your adult life or if you're still in high school, I invite you to come sit with me at the table for everyone. Thank you.
You have really done some amazing work, and I hope you continue to do so. Even though these past few talks have been so entertaining, we are waiting for some of our food trucks to get here. So we're going to do a short Q&A with our first 3 speakers. So please come on up. In the spirit of Q&A, does anyone have a Q for their A? That was an actual question. Would you ask your question? I don't think this can extend that far.
Okay, so how do I make time for my social justice work as well as homework and school and things? I have awesome parents. I think that's the answer to that. It's all about time management, getting things done whenever I have a free second. You can usually find me in my history textbook taking notes. But it's all about managing that and also keeping a life balance, as my mom likes to say. Doing a lot of Global Minds obviously takes up a great amount of my time, but trying to manage that so I can do my schoolwork. Late nights, don't sleep very much, but taking advantage of those weekends. Weekends are always Global Minds time, yeah.
I think for myself, it's more about like making use of time, as you mentioned. I've seen people like sit around all day doing nothing, and when it comes to like 9 p.m., they're like, oh my God, there's so much work, all-nighter again. I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, you've been sitting around watching Netflix all day, so you deserve that. So I think as long as you manage time well, and I think coming to college, I've learned that weekends aren't like party time. They're just like extra days to get work done. It's like a full 24 hours, but there's nothing to do with no plans. So you just get work done. So I think it's managing what you choose to compromise and what you don't choose to compromise. And I think giving a bit of sleep, a bit of social life, a bit of everything in general. I don't have the best grades. I don't have the best of everything, but I'm happy where I am. So I think it's just important for you to find your right spot. I think multitasking. That's a good way to put things.
Any more questions? Okay.
Social justice work you're doing is wonderful and interesting. And the question I have is, how are you going to translate that into your adult lives as you move forward? Is it something you're going to take with you? I realize that you're adult in the sense that you are grown up in so many ways, but in your professional lives, how are you going to continue your social justice work? Is it going to be part of what you do for a living? And how do you think you might do that?
So I'm going to assume this question isn't for Ms. Pierce, because you do it as a profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the question, yeah.
How do you plan to continue your social justice work into your adult professional lives?
How do you think you're going to continue your social justice work in your professional and adult lives?
All right, amazing. It all starts like small, then you grow up and scale slowly. So with TEDx CMU now, I'm working with TEDx Pittsburgh. So the idea is I'm a senior in college, graduation is like knocking on the door. It's 2 years. I'm an architecture student and my program is a 5-year program. And I'm already thinking ahead in the sense that although I'm giving back to community, it's the thought that counts. And now, as much as I give back, I want to gain from it too. So I've grown onto TEDx Pittsburgh so I can expand my professional network beyond the 4 walls of Carnegie Mellon. And I think it's something, since TEDx is a nonprofit, I think that's what gets the best out of me. And I would love to be involved for the rest of my life in some way or the other. And I think the dream with this background is like to get to a TED conference someday. It's ambitious, but miracles do happen. So I would like to believe it'll happen someday.
So I think that the social justice ideas that, or at least we're doing on a larger scale, taking on our own projects, but anyone can infuse these ideas into their own lives, whether that's inviting everyone at your table, as I talked about in my TED Talk. That's an easy thing to do to bring that into your life. On a larger scale, one day I hope to run for public office, so vote Peyton Klein. To make change on that institutionalized level, but just taking the ideas and the small things that you can do, talking to someone unfamiliar. Mentors have been a huge part of my life. I have amazing ones here. Like taking those small things as an adult is a great way to involve those ideas, I guess.
So I feel like we're kind of leaving you out. So I actually want to continue that question. How have you taken the work that you did when you were younger, social justice work, and converted it into your professional and adult life?
So I didn't plan on doing it, but when my kids were all little, I'm talking about like 2, 4, and 6 years old, my friends kind of bossed me into doing a comedy show. And I thought, I don't really have time for this. I'm a full-time innkeeper. And then suddenly I was on stage, and then I was on stage again, and suddenly I'm speaking to 840 people, and then people were begging me to come speak to their college students. So I ended up speaking in a fraternity of football players about healthy choices around sex and relationships. And I spoke for an hour, and they asked questions for 2 hours. And I thought, oh boy, like I thought this internet like was kind of the answer, like had all the information. It turns out despite and almost because of it, people are overwhelmed by information. And so I just started speaking, and then I started writing. I've written 3 books, and I keep going, and I'm a social liability for my children.
Yeah, all the way in the back. So the question was, how can other schools in the area have this club other than Alderdice?
Yes. So I'd love to hear that. So we currently have 11 chapters across the US, Canada, and China. So the way that happens is you go on our website, www.globalminds.world, and you can go to like the chapters page, and there's a small form to fill out, and that will allow us to reach out to you to do like a small interview. There's an application, really short, easy. We love student leaders. So, and then you can start this at your school. Currently in Pittsburgh, we have 5 chapters. Alderdice, Baldwin, the person who runs our Baldwin chapter is actually here, Brashear, and then Carrick, I think it is. So we have 5 here, but love to hear that. Start a chapter at your school.
Any other questions? Yeah? So the question is, how do you make yourself encouraged to have conversations instead of over the phone texting and emailing?
It's become so easy that so many kids, when you say you got to call this person to take driver's ed, And your kid is like, no, that would be so awkward. I cannot call on the phone. And you're like, come on now. And then they do, and they forget to leave their name, and they forget to leave their number. And then the next time they've got a script, they practice, and they get it going, and they nail it. But what's happening is that we spend so much time on our phones and devices that we're losing our ability to read subtle social cues, like what people do with their eyes, what they do with their voice tone, their body language, and that we're not as good at listening. We're really good at like, send out that thought and not really see how it lands, not see how the person felt. So we need to find a balance. So with my own kids on school nights from 7 to 9, the parents and the kids turn off their devices. A lot of parents make their kids turn off their devices, and kids are so resentful. They say there's their parent like, get off the phone, get off this. And meanwhile, they're like, I'm so important, I pay the bills. And that makes so much bitterness. So I think being consistent and sort of requiring the family to take a break. Tony Fadell, the co-creator of the iPhone, he considered himself fully addicted to his phone, and finally he realized it, and he's changed his ways. And with his own family, the co-creator of the iPhone, no devices go on at his house on Sundays, all day Sunday, the adults and the kids. So the more time we kind of find that balance, it gets less awkward to connect with people. And I think we kind of got to force ourselves to do that and ask our kids to get in more awkward situations. I think it's worth it.
Any more questions? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So the question was, you've done a lot in the United States. Would you think about spreading more globally?
Yes. So currently we have 2 chapters. We have one in Hong Kong at the American School, and then one in New Brunswick, Canada. So those chapters, they reached out to me. And as a student, I obviously go to school full time, but as we scale this idea and take it beyond high school into college and beyond, I hope to be able to have the resources and the capacity to make this a full-fledged program and be able to reach every student across the world.
Any more? I actually personally, oh, wait, sorry. Yes? Okay, so the question was that, okay, this is a long one. So, how do you break bubbles between people of different groups?
Okay. So one thing I should say is social media is not all bad. Social media has literally saved the lives of LGBTQ kids, who don't feel in their communities or in their families that they're supported. So there's so many positives. It connects us. It spreads movements. We all are much more awake thanks to the many things going across social media. So I think it's about balance, and because people are at a distance, and sometimes they're even in the same city, but connecting is difficult. The first place is good to start, like social media is a great place to start that connection, but make sure it's balanced with connecting in person and making that effort. I think sometimes, I know the people who created dating apps are kind of frustrated because so many people connect and they swipe right and they exchange numbers and they start texting and passing information, but they get too nervous to actually get together in person to speak. So the people are like, this is a dating app meant to go date, but people won't date. They're like, what if I don't live up to my, profile? And what I put out there, because you can really be careful and edit what you write, but we've got to break through that. So I think it's finding that balance between those two things.
So at least at Alderdice, the program that I run, teenagers are extremely awkward. And whenever we start the meetings, I give them a list of questions. Like I Googled it online, 100 getting to know you questions. And that will help facilitate their conversations because it's not a natural thing yet. But as the year goes on, it becomes more natural and more fluid. And one of the ways that so I went to Kappa for middle school, the Pittsburgh Creative and Performing Arts School. And at the beginning of my acting classes and everything, I was like, I can't look stupid. I have to be very put together or whatever. But as I did improv and musical theater and all these things, I began to loosen up and say, it's not the end of the world if you look stupid. Being bright, sunny, extroverted person is something to be proud of and something to use to connect people, and having a connector or something in the room. And that's a lot of times how we see these globally minded young leaders being open to new ideas and not being afraid to ask the hard questions or be looking stupid. So musical theater and improv and everything that I've done as a kid has really helped me in that sense, and I think that really helps connect people at Global Minds. And something tying it back to the last question about how to expand this globally, as we see things like the refugee crisis and more diversity in our schools and society, not only in America but across the world, Global Minds is a growing need in that sense. So we hope to create more of those connectors and challenge teens to not be scared to look stupid, because I am, but I overcame that, I guess.
Just a quick thing to add to that. I think as parents, we are so protective at times of our kids that we don't want them to fail and we don't admit what we don't know. I think it's really important for our kids to show that we sometimes don't know the answer and that we're stumbling and fumbling. I'm a champ at showing my kids how much I'm stumbling and fumbling. And I think it gives them courage then to be okay with making mistakes. I think we often as parents, we remove all the speed bumps for kids because the world's such a scary, complicated place. But we actually need them to experience the setbacks and the awkwardness, but also model it that we can survive too in those situations.
Sorry, bouncing one more thing. So at Global Minds, one of the biggest things about the student leadership piece is that a lot of times our meetings fail epically, and we're just sitting there and it ends with everyone laughing and we just have conversations. But those failures, they're not actually failures, because we're connecting people, we're connecting humans. The activity might not go well, but we're still doing something. And with our leadership board and what we're doing with Global Minds, the way that we deal with failure defines us, and that's something a lot that I've learned is I fail math tests all the time, I promise. And the way that you deal with that and pick yourself back up, especially after a Global Minds meeting, you're not doing so well, is what teaches you, I guess, those skills.
So that's all the time we have. Okay, I have to look to remind so I don't forget anything about the break. So for the next 15 or so minutes, we'll be taking a break. The food trucks that are outside are for all of you to take from. There's one food truck. Yeah, it's outside. Take from that food truck. Don't take too much that you won't eat. There will be another break to get food, but due to cost and food waste, make sure you'll eat it if you'll take it, okay? It's important. Also, bathrooms are over there as well as water, and the entrepreneurs, which are back there at that table behind you that's very well lit compared to everything else. So yeah, go and talk to them and see everything that they have. There's some amazing stuff. There are some reptiles, there are some cupcakes, and there are a lot of really, really cool businesses from kids who are under 21. So yeah, have a great break, and I will make an announcement when it's time to come back. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, everyone, hello. The break is now over. If you are still eating food, you do not need to throw it away. You may continue to eat in your seat, unlike at a theater where you'd have to throw it away. I know this might seem like a small space for all of these people, but at least we get to eat at our seats. So yeah. Okay. We do ask that you don't stand up to throw anything while we're doing the talks. So when I give my next introduction, then throwing stuff away is fine, or when we're doing the next video, it's fine, but not during because it might throw off the recordings. Okay. Speaking of introducing our next speaker, Our next speaker has done some amazing research. Thanks to our sponsors. Our next speaker has done some amazing research on a very important topic. He's a junior at Fox Chapel High School and has been very passionate about science since a very young age, and biology in particular, since 8th grade. Due to his passion and action, he has won science fair awards at both the regional and state level from Pittsburgh Regional Science and Engineering Fair and Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science. That is a mouthful. He received the CMU DNA Zone Award not once, but twice. He has worked for the past 2 summers at the UPMC Hillman Cancer Center. He is an avid musician, playing violin at his school and with the Pittsburgh Youth Symphony Orchestra, and he knows how to surf. Please help me welcome the brilliant Zachary Lakis.
All right, good afternoon. A few years ago, I came up with the idea for a novel genetic weapon for use against cancer. I've spent the past few summers researching this treatment. So cancer is really a monumental problem around the globe. In the US alone, cancer kills 1 person every single minute. So cancer comes in all shapes and sizes. It can affect people of all ages, and it can affect every organ in the body. And one of the reasons cancer remains such a big problem is because current treatments are insufficient in order to effectively treat it. So current treatments such as chemotherapy can be compared to an atomic bomb. While they may kill the target, they also affect all the cells around it. So what we really need in cancer treatment is Robin Hood's arrow. We need a magic bullet that hits the bullseye every time. We need a cancer treatment that kills the cancer cells without causing side effects. The method by which I propose to accomplish this is called CRISPR-Cas. So CRISPR-Cas is an ancient bacterial defense mechanism against foreign DNA. So for example, a bacterial cell would use it, and if it were to be invaded by a viral DNA, that could potentially kill the cell. So CRISPR-Cas operates on a very simple mechanism. It's made up of 2 main parts. So you can see in yellow the guide RNA. That works almost like a GPS system. It matches a sequence on the target DNA. The big blue blob is the Cas, and that acts like a pair of scissors. When the CRISPR-Cas is guided by the guide RNA to the target and wraps around it, the Cas snips the target, and that makes it non-functional. So you may have heard about CRISPR-Cas in the media. It's really exploded in the scientific community over the past few years because it's been used to edit DNA in everything from portobello mushrooms in order to make them resistant to rot, to even in the human genome, in human embryos in order to cure inherited diseases. But the way I propose to use CRISPR-Cas in my cancer treatment is slightly unconventional. I want to target the cancer cell's RNA. So why target RNA? In context of a cancer treatment, targeting RNA is a lot safer than targeting DNA. DNA is the blueprint of the cell. It is the instructions that the cell uses in order to produce proteins throughout its lifetime, and then that blueprint is passed on to the cell's offspring. That means that if you were to accidentally target and edit the DNA of a normal cell that isn't cancerous, it could cause long-standing tissue harm. On the other hand, RNA is the message that is copied from that DNA. It is transient. It only lasts in the cell for a matter of hours or a day. And as a result, the damage accidentally done to normal tissue won't be nearly as harmful. So I propose to target the cancer cell's apoptosis cycle. So apoptosis is something you can think of like cell suicide. It's an extremely important biological process that has happened in your cells since birth. So when you receive a paper cut, for example, the skin cells only heal. They only divide to fill the gap. They don't continue dividing because the extra tissue that would create would be called a tumor, cells dividing out of control. So this is because your body is regulating the cell's growth by causing them to commit apoptosis. So in a normal cell, there's a healthy balance of anti-apoptotic and pro-apoptotic proteins. If the cell needs to grow, the anti-apoptotic levels will increase. If the cell needs to die, then the anti-apoptotic levels will decrease. So the seesaw can sway, but it won't be out of balance. On the other hand, in a cancer cell, it is completely out of balance. The anti-apoptotic proteins strongly outweigh the pro-apoptotic proteins, and as a result, the cancer cell divides out of control, with nothing to cause it to kill itself. In order to fix this problem and kill the cancer cell, we need to tip the balance the other way. We need to decrease the cancer cell's production of anti-apoptotic proteins so that it is outweighed by the production of pro-apoptotic proteins, and the cell commits apoptosis and dies. So in order to introduce the CRISPR-Cas into these cells to target their anti-apoptotic mRNA and cause them to stop producing the anti-apoptotic proteins, I designed a plasmid. So this plasmid targets the protein MCL1, which is an anti-apoptotic protein that a lot of human blood and breast cancers are very heavily reliant on. So you can see on the plasmid, there is the Cas, the scissors, there's the guide RNA that matches this MCL1, so that's the GPS system, and then there's GFP, green fluorescent protein. So GFP is a protein that's found in jellyfish. Under ultraviolet light, it glows bright green. And if you put the GFP into an animal cell or a human cell, it causes that cell to glow bright green. And because of its properties, GFP has been used for years by scientists as what they call a genetic tag. So when you put GFP alongside a DNA into a cell, it gives you a very easy way of knowing whether the DNA has made it into the cell, because if it has, then the cell will glow green. So these are the breast cancer cells that I used that, as I mentioned before, this particular cell was very heavily reliant on the MCL1 for its survival. So this is a picture of them under visible light, but when we introduce the DNA, turn the lights off, and turn the UV light on, it looks like this. The cells glow green. And that means that the DNA made it into the cells. That means that there's an active CRISPR-Cas treatment in the cells targeting their RNA and hopefully causing them to commit apoptosis. And sure enough, when I did a counting experiment after they were given the treatment, you can see that the cells that received the CRISPR-Cas treatment, which are shown in red, began to die. They were compared to a control treatment, which was shown in blue, that did receive a plasmid, but that plasmid didn't contain the DNA coding for the CRISPR-Cas. So this experiment was done in living cells in the test tube. But to move this treatment one step closer to becoming a treatment that could be used in human cancer patients, the next step would be to do an in vivo experiment. So that means in a living organism. There are a lot of factors in an organism that play a big role in how effective a treatment is. And we also need to test whether the treatment has any harmful side effects. So to do this, I would induce a tumor in a mouse, and then introduce the CRISPR-Cas treatment using what a scientist would call a viral vector. And then at that point, I could see whether I could cure the cancer with the CRISPR-Cas. So I want you to imagine a world where patients no longer have to choose between suffering at the hands of something as uncontrollable and devastating as cancer, and suffering at the hands of a treatment that has harmful side effects. I want you to imagine a world where cancer patients receive personalized treatments that don't cause suffering. I want you to imagine a world where we can stop the clock on cancer deaths. Thank you.
Very interesting, Zach. Thank you for explaining this important topic to me and all of us. Now, anyone who needs to throw something away can go. Trash cans are somewhere behind you or next to you. Somewhere. There are trash cans. I can guarantee that. Our next speaker is a very cool person. Without spoiling too much, she is the ambassador and lead innovator of a nonprofit. She has pushed through any expectations and proved she can do almost anything. She leads activities and is a mentor. She has shown off her work on Rachel Ray, at Maker Faire, and many other places across the country. She's our youngest speaker. She plans to write an autobiography, and she once rode the Expedition Everest ride at Disney 11 times in one day. Please help me welcome the extraordinary Jordan Reeves.
Hi, my name's Jordan Reeves, and I'm 11 years old, and I'm from Columbia, Missouri. And I was born with a left arm that stops just above the elbow, but that hasn't stopped me from doing anything. And usually when I meet people, I'll usually hide my arm behind my back, or if I'm sitting down at a table, I'll hide it underneath the table. And that's so people don't judge me off of my difference, and they judge me off of my personality. And I wish that we could change that and not have to have me hide my arm. And this talk has a little bit to do with dolls, and I know there's a couple of you thinking, really? I came to a talk about dolls. But trust me, it's more than just about dolls. And to get to that part, I'm going to tell you some of the reactions that I get when people see my arm. And some of the not so great ways are intense staring, where you cannot get the eyes off of the arm. Me and my mom were in Boston, and we were eating at this open table place, so anyone could sit at it. And a mom, daughter, and son sat across from us, and immediately their eyes just attached to my arm, and it got to the point where I just slipped it into my purse, and they still kept on staring. It was super creepy. And then there's a super scared person. So I'm gonna act this one out. Oh my gosh, your arm, it's not there, right there. Do you see her arm? Oh my gosh. And then there's a super grabby person, where they will just grab your arm and touch it. I mean, personal space. And those are some of the ways that I don't like so much. And then some of the good ways are when they try to relate to me. Oh my gosh, my teachers, friends, granddaughter, she's missing a finger, so I get you, talk to me. And then there's just the polite intro, where they just introduce themselves and ask what happened to my arm. Or, of course, you could just be my twin best friends that I grew up with. And one of my thoughts is, what if I could walk on to a playground, let's say, and everyone just see me as a crazy kid just playing. And I feel like this has a lot to do with the talk that I'm talking about today. And when I was little, my mom got me and my American Girl doll a matching outfit, and mom was like, oh my gosh, you guys are matching, how cute. And I'm like, I think I know what matching means. So if we're matching, why doesn't it have an arm like me? And my mom was like, oh. So last year, I started a petition for American Girl to offer limb-different options in their dolls, and it has 25,000 signatures, and American Girl does know about it, and they said, maybe. I mean, we want it to be a yes, but it's still better than a no. And so we do have some companies out there that are making limb-different options in toys, like a step ahead prosthetics, where you can send in your American Girl doll and they will make it match your body. And American Girl has a line called Truly Me, where they have dolls that you can make look like you. So they have, let's say you're going through chemo, you can get the hair on your doll off, or if you have glasses, you can get glasses for your doll, or if you broke your leg, you can get crutches, and so much more. And I think they should offer limb different options too. And then there's a doll like me, where this really cool lady makes homemade dolls to match any difference, which is cool. Yeah. And then there's a Vermont teddy bear company in Vermont, who knew? And they make limb different teddy bears. And I bet there's a couple of you thinking, why American Girl? That's like such a big company. Well, the reason why is I don't really want the doll just for me to have a limb different doll that looks like me. I want it so more kids know what limb differences are. Because my guess is that most of you didn't know what a limb difference was before you came and saw me. And I think that if it would be really cool if a kid was able to, let's say, walk on into their toy store and saw limb different toys everywhere. And I feel like this is a really good way for more kids to get to know the differences in our society. And I've been talking a lot on stages and on the internet to get my word out about limb differences. And I go to this really cool camp. I've been going since I was really little and fundraising for it. It's called Camp No Limits, and it's for kids with limb differences, and they get to go and meet more kids and relate to them and make friends and get inspired by the mentors in training. And I've been talking more about this so more kids get the chance to go to this camp. And this year I got invited to go on the Rachel Ray show, and the Shark Tank crew was also on it, and I got to show what I created. And I created a prosthetic arm that shoots glitter. So this is compressed air, and it shoots out air through this tube, and this thing right here is filled with glitter. And so when I press this button right here, it will shoot out. And the star thing is to lock it and unlock it. And I think it's unlocked, hopefully. So I'm going to show a little example. Yeah. I made sure not to shoot too much because I have to clean that up. And that was a really cool experience so that I could show that you can build on your difference to make it awesome, not like it wasn't already awesome. And that's when I sort of started blowing up on social media. And it's definitely given me more of a chance to talk on stages like this. And me and my mom started a nonprofit called Born Just Right for kids with differences of any sort to build onto their difference to make whatever they want, because kids know what they want and most people try to do it for them, but I feel like it's important that they do it for themselves. And this year we had an event in Boston and it was only upper and lower limb differences, but we want to spread to all differences. And I have 3 tips. 1 is to be yourself, because you, being you, is the best you that you can be. I know, that's a lot of yous. And then to speak up, because what you have to say is really important, and it can change your community in such an amazing way. And to use your differences for good, because your differences are amazing, and you never know what amazing things you can do with them. Thank you.
We were serious about her cleaning it up. That was amazing, Jordan. I appreciate you showing us a big problem that we can work to solve. Our next speaker is going to show us. Our next speaker is going to show us how we can make a difference at any moment. He's a multimedia professional who's passionate, driven, and charismatic. He works as a speaker, consultant, marketeer, and photographer, mainly for summer camps and schools. I can't seem to remember where he comes from. Oh, Canada! Oh, Canada. But he is set out to learn. His name is a travesty. And he has a tattoo of a word that is part of a story made of 2,400 people, also with a one-word tattoo. And he hasn't let me listen to his talk until now. Please help me welcome the wonderful Travis Allison.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nadav. Thanks. I'll get started. Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. On a warm summer afternoon in 1984, my camp counselor said to me 8 words that would change my life. He said to me, Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. Up until that point, I didn't feel like I belonged in lots of places. I was a nerdy kid growing up in a village where they celebrated baseball players and hockey jocks. And my family still talks about how I would walk to the school bus reading one book and walk home from the school bus reading another book. Yet somehow, my camp counselor saw something different in me. I know that I had it lucky because I had a very supportive family. But like many kids, I was bullied on that school bus and I was bullied at school. Yet, Ian McLean, my camp counselor, saw something different in me. He invested 5 seconds in me that changed my life. So on that afternoon, we got out of lunch at camp, went back to our cabin, and he asked to speak to me outside. He said, Travis, can I speak to you outside? We went and stood by the picnic table, asked me to sit down. I thought I was in big trouble. Something had gone on that I couldn't quite figure out, but that I was in big trouble. Yet I sat down, and without preamble, he just said to me, Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. Because of that moment, that set me on a path to this moment and this stage. 5 seconds of his life put me here today. Now, because of what he did, I found my higher purpose in life. I believe that my purpose is very closely tied with the higher purpose of summer camp. And that is to provide a place, a community, where kids can be recognized and acknowledged for their individual talents. And we can help adults find the time to create that moment with those kids. And so I'm here today to ask you to help me make that the higher purpose of every single community. That we find the time to recognize and acknowledge kids for the things that make them special. Now, kids are often lumped into groups. We put them into groups. So they might be one of Mrs. Shields' 3rd grade class, or they might be a nerd or a jock, or they might be the pretty one in the family. They might be the kid with the funny accent, or the queer kid, or the kid who lives with their grandma because they don't have a mom and dad. But if we take a moment and acknowledge and appreciate them, we give them a place where they belong. Now, I believe that this has happened for most people in this room. So what I'd like you to do is take a second and think about your person. The person who stopped, they're most likely not your parent. The person who stopped and said something to you, encouraged you when you were young. The person who noticed the thing that you were passionate about. Picture that person in your mind. Your person and my person did something that I call the power of one. There's some really interesting research coming out of the Centers of the Developing Child at Harvard University, from Flinders University in Australia, and from a 12,000 child study done in the country of Ireland. Those studies all show that if we invest just a small moment of our time develop a relationship with just one child, that child's life can be changed. In Ireland, they've taken that research and they've created a program called One Good Adult. Because the research clearly shows if you're a child at risk of drugs, dropping out of school, bad relationships, making poor choices, all you need is one good adult in your life to change that. So this research shows that if a child has someone who invests in them, takes just a moment, as I said for me, it happened at a great moment and it was 5 seconds. Invest in that child, what happens is that they have much higher self-esteem. This is a child who can stand up for his or herself. This is a child who, when she does great at a dance recital, will actually accept the praise that she's given. These kids also have they make better choices in the world. They're much more confident. So this is a kid who will raise their hand and say, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand that thing that you're trying to teach me. They'll be the person who then can stand in front of a bully who's picking on a friend. They also have much better mental toughness. So these are kids who can try something, learn from it, try again, fail, learn, try, fail, until they eventually succeed. And that mental toughness can carry through for the rest of their life. They also know that they belong. And that sense of belonging, as I said, was something incredibly important to me as a child because I didn't have it in my home community. I found it at summer camp. So we can develop these relationships and develop the things that happen with these kids and help them fit in, give them a place. So I was lucky enough when I was 15 years old to have another critical moment, something that happened to me exactly when I needed it. My mother's friends, Marion Crawford, was our hairdresser growing up. And like many of my mother's friends, we had a great relationship. It was cordial, it was polite. Except one afternoon, a Friday afternoon, I know it was a Friday because it was my very first high school dance. I sat down in Marion's chair, she put the drape around me, she pulled out the scissors, she looked at me in the mirror, and she said, Travis, let's try something really different. Marion saw me as someone different than I saw myself. She changed the way I saw myself. It matters little that Marion and I spent the next 5 years doing every crazy color cut, whatever we could come up with to do different. It matters most that she saw me as a kid who could be creative and would love to express that. Saw me as someone who would love to express the kind of music they liked by the way they wore their hair. Marion saw me and told me in that moment that she saw me as a very creative kid who could and would love to express themselves. Now, when I was older, I was a volunteer firefighter for 7 years. As part of that, I learned, being part of the firefighter culture, I learned about challenge coins. So I believe that this power of one moment, these power of one moments that we share with kids are incredibly important. Really, it's the essence of my talk. But I think it can also help adults as well. And challenge coins are one of those things that really clued me into how that was possible. So a challenge coin is a token, custom made, that shows you're part of a group. So it's most often a coin that you can carry around with you. They're made for military regiments, for emergency services personnel. Now there are some clubs and other school organizations that are doing challenge coins as well. Challenge coins have an amazing culture around them. It's a true symbol of belonging. And they're custom just to your unit, your group, your club. It shows that you belong. But the power of one that happens with challenge coins is when they are passed off to someone who's not part of your group. They're given on to someone. I love it because they're given in a secret handshake. You tuck your coin into your hand and then shake that person's hand to hand it off to them. So that person is sort of surprised by that moment. What is this? And they take a look at it. That allows someone who may be of higher rank, who may be of greater social stature, in those organizations that are not touchy-feely, and in fact where individuality is often discouraged, it allows that person to say, I recognize you, I thank you, your contribution is important. What you've done, I believe in. That's the power of one of challenge coins. Now, I received my coin when I was giving a speech at a conference talking about how to get more kids to camp. And at the end of that speech, someone came up and shook my hand, and I was surprised to see the coin that he handed me. He was a retired firefighter who was on the board of a camp. And that camp was created to help kids who had had severe burns. And he came up to thank me for what I had done, helping them get more kids into their camp and helping them to create more programs where they could grow and develop those kids in the programs. So I was encouraged to have that moment where I was given my coin as well. So the power of one is something that, as I say, I think we can all do and I think we should focus on. In order to make it easier for you, I've broken it down and made it into an acronym. So I want you to think about one. Thinking about open, needs, and explore. So you want to be open to these things. You want to be open to the moments when you can have conversations with kids, when you can enjoy a moment with them. So for me at summer camp, that happened in transitions from walking from one activity to the other. It happened in moments where we were waiting in line for the dining hall. But in the rest of the world, I see that happening at camp. I see that happening in places in your lives, like when you're riding in a minivan to a practice, or when you finally have dinner with just one child at the table, or that kid finishes a practice and they need to sit down, or they close up a book and that happens. There's just a little moment there. So I'd like you to notice those things. So the next part of that is to think about how you can look after their needs. Just acknowledge that they need something. What is it you need? How can I help you, etc. That helps each child in that moment. The next part of that is to engage with them. So that involves starting a conversation. It might be having questions that you can ask them, giving them something that can start a conversation. How can you ask them open questions? Everybody knows when you say, "How was your day at school?" the answer is, "It's fine." You want to ask questions that get more than just "it's fine." Think about how we can engage more. So ask how questions or why questions. Why did you do that thing today? Why did your friend talk to you that way? How did you make that thing that you loved? Ways that we can get into deeper conversations. Now, open needs, engage, or open notice and engage, those are important things to remember. That's why I call it the power of one. So we have that in our mind, but sometimes people ask me, what do I actually do? I get a child's attention, I'm open to this moment, but what do the conversations look like? The conversations look like an exchange between you and them. It is the open questions, it's the noticing the things that are important to them. You know, it's saying, I saw that you've been reading this book on this topic. What makes you interested in that? Some of my favorite moments from when I was a child with my dad happened when the two of us would ride in our John Deere tractor, listening to 8-track tapes of Boney M. and Kenny Rogers while tilling the fields. And I would love to go with my dad. We'd spend hours in the fields and just have conversations. Those conversations were centered around my life, how I was enjoying it, what I enjoyed, school, things like that. What made those conversations different than a lot of other conversations with adults is that those were the times that my dad opened up to me, that my dad would share things with me. And that didn't happen very often. I treasure those moments because of that. So he would talk about where we were going with our farm business, what we needed to do, what livestock we were going to purchase. And as a kid, it was the first time I felt like I was involved in our family business. And I've treasured those moments because of that time. So I hope that in doing this, you see that it's important that we take the time to have conversations, that we notice kids, that we're open to them, and that we have moments with them where we can make them feel great. Because as I said, this impact can last forever. In moments where they really need it, you don't know if 8 words, Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. 5 seconds of that person's life, my camp counselor Ian, led down a path that has taken me 35 years. So what I'd like to do is give you one last thing to think about. Sometimes it's the conversation things that we stumble over. It's like, how do we get to the next level of conversation? You're so caught up in, I'm having a power of one moment with this person. I've stopped, I've noticed, I've got down to their level, and now what do I do? What I'd like you to think about my camp counselor, Ian. I call this the Ian formula for great conversations with kids and teens. So I'd like you to think about Ian as an acronym: interesting, and next. What do you find interesting? What do you love to learn about? What gets you excited? We know kids in our lives who are interested and excited about things because we've seen them sing. They're just so excited. We know kids, and we can pick up on when kids love something because that is the moment where they get their dancing pants on and they talk and run in sentences and they're great big paragraphs that never seem to end because they're so excited about things. Pick up on those. What are you interested in? What's that thing? What's got you so excited? Those conversations you can help continue by simply saying, and keep that conversation going. And what else? And let those conversations go to their normal end. And then the last stage of the Ian formula is the part that I think truly solidifies in that child's heart that you care about them. What's next? What's next for you? What happens when you leave this place? What's the next project you want to do on this topic? What book are you looking forward to reading to next? As an adult, what you're showing to a kid is, I care about this little moment that we're having right now. But by saying, what's next? We say to that child, I care about your future. I care about more than this little exchange right now. I care about what happens to you tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next summer. So remember, interesting and next. This gentleman's name is Scott St. Clair, and he was the camp director when I finally did become a counselor at Camp Kintail. So Ian McLean was my first counselor, my counselor that gave me this speech, but Scott said something to me at camp as well. In the same way that Ian did, this was a moment where I really needed something from an adult that I looked up to. He didn't know that, but he was willing to give it anyway, and it's had an impact on me. So during a performance evaluation, Scott said to me, Travis, people like us really need to do things that surprise others, that blow away other people's expectations. So maybe we don't actually go on to secondary school. Maybe we travel instead. Maybe we work flipping burgers. Maybe we work in a factory. But we need to do stuff. People like us need to do projects like this because it helps us be more empathetic leaders. It helps us have more empathy for the people that we work for. So great advice from Scott. I've obviously never forgotten it. But the magic of that conversation to me was when he said, Travis, people like us. This man that I looked up to, this man that I respected, this man who had my dream job, said, people like us. He was signaling to me I was like him. And because Scott St. Clair said people like us, I have worked around the world teaching leadership to adults and kids around the world. Because he said that, I am calm and collected in emergencies, because he changed the way I saw myself. Because he said that, I was able to get up and lead silly songs in front of a couple of hundred people with no problem whatsoever. Because Scott said that, because he said people like us, I've been able to go around the world training people to build communities where we notice and appreciate each child. Because Ian said that, because Marion said that, and because Scott said that, I also was able to find somebody, in fact more than one, and say to them, you know, you will be a great camp counselor. And that's the power of one. Thank you. Yes, good idea.
Amazing job. I will try my best to remember this for when I'm older. Our next speaker knows that you should always be doing something different than others. She's a sophomore at the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders in Austin, Texas, and she believes you can't be happy unless you try something new. She believes this so much that she's never ordered the same flavor of ice cream twice. Crazy. She says you shouldn't just be part of the herd. You should do something unique. She wants to hike the Appalachian Trail. She understands that work is sometimes more rewarding than fun, and she prefers the passenger seat in the second row of a car. Please help me welcome the great Kate Singer.
A scoop of mint chip for Dad, coffee almond fudge for my mom, 2 scoops of vanilla for my sister, and for this visit, candy carnival. When I was 3 years old, I would never order the same flavor of ice cream twice. I mean, why always get the same thing when there's pistachio almond, strawberry cheesecake, or just something new to try? The man who ran our local ice cream shop said he had never seen a kid who tried something new every single time. To me, this seemed normal, but I guess most kids are expected to stick to their known flavors. But I liked not being locked into what I had done before or what was expected of me. And not every flavor was great, but at least I tried. Too often we get stuck doing the same things over and over again. This is about more than what dessert you order. It's about all kinds of things we face as kids, teens, and young adults. It can be hard to break away from what everyone wants us to do. I believe that at our age, we are still trying to figure out who we are and to find our place in the world. But the media, society, our friends, our teachers, and our parents try to tell us who we should be and what we should do. And some might say that to go against these influences, you have to be brave, and when most people think of bravery, they think of things like jumping off of cliffs. But bravery doesn't have to be about taking these big risks. It can be about taking the small ones. In 5th grade, I was faced with a choice. I could move on from my local elementary school to my neighborhood middle school with all my friends, or I could apply to a unique magnet school called Ann Richards. Ann Richards is a middle school and a high school where they wear uniforms, have longer school days, and it's all girls. There were a lot of reasons why I thought I shouldn't go. I thought I'd be giving up my individuality, Friday night football games. My chances of meeting boys went way down. And plus, I would have to make all new friends, which is enough of a challenge already. To accept my offer to attend the Ann Richards School would mean leaving behind everybody I had known since kindergarten. But it also meant opening myself up to a unique educational environment. The Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders has rigorous academics and high expectations for every student. 100% of our graduates have gone on to four-year colleges. 65% of those are the first people in their families to go to college. We've also earned millions of dollars in merit-based scholarships. At the time, my sister was attending a different magnet high school, and I had seen all the advantages that this had brought her, so I decided to go for it. And in my first year, I was invited by some teachers to talk with some potential donors who were thinking about funding our school's makerspace. Not many sixth graders get asked to participate in fundraising conversations. And this was just one of the amazing opportunities I've gotten because I decided to go my own way and not follow the crowd. And in the end, this was quite possibly the best decision I have ever made. If you Google the term successful teens, you will find hundreds of stories of young scientists, entrepreneurs, media moguls, philanthropists, and fashion designers who are making headlines for their giant discoveries and contributions to the world. But we don't all have to be making headlines to make a difference. I am not an expert. I'm just a girl who's trying to find her place in the world, while at the same time trying to get my driver's license. For the past 6 months, I've been following the YouTube video diaries of the journey of Jessica Mills, also known as Dixie. Dixie is a 30-something-year-old woman who walked away from a successful career as an engineer in Denver, Colorado to hike the Appalachian Trail. In case you don't know about the Appalachian Trail, it is a 2,180-mile hike that takes an average of 6 months to complete. You live in a tent and walk about 20 miles a day, every day, carrying all of your possessions on your back. It is extremely long, hard, lonely, and most people who attempt it never complete the journey. On October 19th, 2015, Dixie arrived in Maine at the end of the trail. This is not something most people would expect from a young woman with a good job and a busy life to go and do. Plus, most people who do this hike are men, and she decided to do it alone. But she didn't let any of that stop her from achieving her dream. Oh, and she didn't stop there. This year, on October 12th, she completed the 2,650-mile Pacific Crest Trail, and next year she plans on hiking the 3,100-mile Continental Divide Trail, thus completing the Hiker Triple Crown. I love the idea of undertaking a journey like this, and I plan on hiking the Appalachian Trail after I finish college. As I've talked about this with my parents, they have cautioned me about the many obstacles I will face while undertaking this journey. They remind me it's long, hard, and cold, and that there are sometimes days where hikers are low on food, and that it could be a while before they get to the next town. Well, it's not that they're not supportive of my dreams, it's just parents worry about things like a young woman hiking through the woods across 14 states. But this is something I hope to do with my life, and I accept that there are hardships that come along with accomplishing great things. Oh, and as for my parents' concerns, well, this is still 6 or 7 years away, and I'll be an adult, so I won't need their permission. My own thoughts about how to go your own way come from looking at the long view rather than the short term. We often hear teachers and parents say, oh, what others think doesn't matter. And that's easier said than done, and plus, we're teenagers, it kind of matters to us. And it can be so easy to just follow the crowd if your focus is only on today. But if you look at the long-term view, it becomes much easier to disregard what other people think and to make choices for you. And only you. As a teenager, I spend a lot of time watching YouTube. Come on, you do it too. And many of the YouTubers we enjoy did not set out to become famous or to get millions of views. They just tried new things and talked about ideas that interested them. And if you read the bios of many of these YouTube celebrities, many of them went to prestigious colleges and studied serious subjects like economics or marketing strategies. They just made their videos for fun and talked about ideas that interested them, not society as a whole. It was their personal passion and style that created their following. Tyler Oakley is a great example of this, and he got started making videos on YouTube as a way to communicate with his friends from high school who are at different colleges. Now, he is an internationally known personality and activist who has appeared on many TV shows, including The Ellen Show. So how can we find ourselves? Well, I'm not sure I know all the answers, or any of them, but for me, it's all about think, talk, do. I spend a lot of time thinking about my future and things that interest me, and then I talk about it a lot. Ask my friends, my teachers, my sister, or my parents. I can talk a lot. But talking with others about things that interest me helps me figure out if I'm really interested in a subject or if it's just a passing thought. And then I do something. While I'm not ready to take on that 6-month hike just yet, I've gotten my parents to take me on smaller hikes at home in Texas and to the Grand Canyon, which has helped me discover that I love being in nature. So what interests you? What does going your own way look like to you? Think about it, talk about it, and then take small actions to see if you really like it. And, maybe even break some rules. Well, I'm not telling you to become a rebel. You still have to make good choices, but before we can find ourselves, we must look for what it is that truly inspires us. And along the way, you might stumble. Sir Richard Branson once said, as a baby, we don't learn to walk by following rules. We learn to walk by doing and falling over. So it's okay to make mistakes. We're teenagers. We don't have all the answers, and we are not going to do everything right. But before we can reach our potential, we must look for who we are and to find our place in the world. Remember the poet Robert Frost's words. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And start small. If you're not ready to order a double scoop of something, at least ask for a taster spoon. Use this time in your life to find your place in the world and to figure out who you are and what interests you. And remember, before we can go our own way, we must find our way. Thank you.
Okay, that was really enlightening, amazing work. I know I already said this, but this time we are going to go and get food directly because food is amazing. So amazing. So outside we have a Mexican truck, and I believe ice cream. It is cold, but we'll be eating in here where it is not cold. So remember, you can eat in here. Enjoy. I will make an announcement when it's time to come back again. And go check out the entrepreneur tables. Yeah. You're surprised by it?
When he kicked the cord.
Yeah, seriously. I was like, if there was, we're not going to find it. At least not until. Seriously. Testing? Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you, Mr. Steinberg, for responding. So the break is over. Back to your seats. I hope you guys still enjoyed meeting all the entrepreneurs and getting the food. The ice cream was great, and so were the tacos. Thank you to them. Yet again, you don't have to throw away your food right now, but if you're going to, wait until the end of the talk, and please wait until I introduce the next speaker. Okay, please redirect your attention towards the stage. Wait, I just mentioned this. Who wrote this? Oh, wait, it was me. I did. Speaking of the next speaker, our next speaker is pretty astounding. She's a native Pittsburgher, it's like a burger, and a junior at the University of Pittsburgh, where she studies supply chain management and business information systems and is working hard to get a certificate in sustainability with concentrations in industrial and environmental engineering applications. That is a lot of words. She does all of that, and she still found time to write and memorize a 10 to 18 minute talk for today. A wise man, who may or may not be in the audience, once told me, the best people are always the busiest people. This is definitely true. Wait. Thanks to our sponsors. This is definitely true for the speakers today. She works a lot with her University Honors College and also with Pitt Ohio Express, PPG Industries, and more. She founded and is the CEO of Co-op, Connecting Ordinary People. She was a Her Lead Fellow and a Her Lead Ambassador, and she's commonly mistaken as a Danish ninja. Please help me welcome the magnificent Teresa Lethrow.
I think it is only right to start this talk off with an apology. An apology to the audience members, an apology to anyone who may watch this talk, to future generations, and to the planet. I was first introduced to the human cause realities of environmental degradation, changes to our climate, in the ways that our built, our designed, and our engineered world has adversely impacted our natural systems the same way I presume many of you were introduced to these topics, through the Harvard Business Review. I was preparing a research proposal the second semester of my first year of college when I read in a compilation of Harvard Business Review articles on supply chain management of the cotton harvesting process for organic versus inorganic cotton used for t-shirt production. It was the first time that I was learning about the environment in a context that I felt connected with, that is business, and the first time that I began to recognize that the number one driving force of economic development was the same source of environmental damage. I didn't fully realize it at the time, but it was learning about the environment, something I admittedly did not care outright for and did not know all that much about, through a business process that has completely altered my perspective and frame of reference. In addition to studying supply chain management and business information systems, I'm also concentrating on sustainability through industrial and environmental engineering applications. I've conducted independent research on the intersection of business and engineering to inform companies on how they can optimize their supply chains to be more environmentally efficient and sustainable. And just recently, traveled across the ocean to study abroad and climb a 60-meter offshore wind turbine in Copenhagen, Denmark. It was here, the proclaimed sustainability capital of the world, that I realized that investing in, developing, and implementing cutting-edge technologies to better serve the environment, and by extension, the residents of Copenhagen, was done simply because it was logical and the right thing to do. Now, I don't have a green thumb. I don't self-identify as a tree hugger, and although most of my money is spent at REI, I couldn't be even considered an avid outdoors woman. I am, however, an aspiring changemaker, an unconventional path traveler, a risk taker, an ordinary person, looking to improve our world through systems-based designs and improved choice architecture. The value of these and additional not mentioned experiences have completely shifted my personal values and professional trajectory. These experiences to date have culminated in the recent launch of a B Corp in its infancy, my community-based project and organization called Co-op, Connecting Ordinary People, pun fully intended. The goal of the organization is to communicate through science-based communication and to promote inclusivity through communication, to talk to Pittsburgh's energy stakeholders about climatic issues. This is done through advanced science-based communication in collaboration with scientists, engineers, and other related experts explaining these issues to non-experts. The goal of our programming is to hold what you all have to say, think, and question central to our mission and central to our success. We do this by partnering with local organizations to provide a forum-based series that discusses climate change through an interdisciplinary lens, which includes large and small businesses, government representatives of any level, local community members, and scientists and engineers. In today's technologically dominant world, more information than ever before is available and accessible. The goal of Co-op is to promote networking, science-based communication, interactive learning platforms, and evaluation to take the critical steps that are necessary to achieving our three major goals, which are an informed community, an engaged community, and enabling underrepresented voices. You see, the issue with climate change, scientific facts, sustainability, and plain and simple human behavior is that something as routine as our everyday actions and choices have become distant. Every day, we make energy decisions, large and small, that have real economic, environmental, and social impact. Co-op works with local organizations to make all of the information that's readily available to us comprehensible and relevant to the community. Because science and engineering are at the heart of most energy-related decisions, it is critical that non-expert stakeholders understand the unique challenges and opportunities. Unique to the city of Pittsburgh is the innate connection one has with other community members. Pittsburgh has an incredible opportunity to address these issues, and Co-op is the organization that seeks to provide the space and the programming for this to actualize. The way that we all discuss the technicalities of various disciplines, be it science and engineering, business, or policy, has in effect created a silo effect that prevents a conversation among these groups to result in much of anything, never minding the urgency and the complexity of these issues. We are speaking in our own professional languages and using our own technical jargon instead of speaking the language of the future. The choices that you and I are confronted with every single day make it apparent that these choices are not only environmentally and socially damaging, not only occurring in globally far-off places, but happening here, locally, in Pittsburgh, every single day. Many of our systems, our ideas, and our approaches of what we have grown to accept as normal with regards to energy sourcing, distribution, and use provide some of the greatest challenges, but also serve as the foundation for some of the greatest opportunities of our future. Let's move the conversation outside the conference room, beyond the lab, and beyond political engagement, recognizing that businessmen and women, scientists and engineers, and policymakers are people too. Let's also realize and shift our focus to what you and I can do, whether or not we are members of these stakeholder groups, acknowledging that we are all part of the Pittsburgh community. What sustainability means in specific contexts, business, science or engineering, policy, and therefore within local communities, is critical to further understand and explore. The bottom line for all community members is that sustainability is about environmental issues, climatic uncertainty, and energy security. And more importantly than that, sustainability is about inclusivity. It is about recognizing that fundamentally, regardless of the stakeholder group that we represent, is that issues regarding energy security warrant our concerns and should therefore require our input when we are creating solutions. Co-op is working to provide the programming that enhances communication, participation, and transparency in so many ways that allows all of us to be stakeholders in these conversations. Because sustainability is so much about inclusivity, there's a critical stakeholder that's absent from most of our conversations, and that is you and I. Put differently, the bottom line for all community members, regardless of the stakeholder group that we represent, is that environmental issues, climatic uncertainty, and changes in our climate have a lot to do with the way that we go about our everyday lives. It's important for us to understand these critical issues and the ways that we can engage and address these issues. We can and must look for points of unity and commonality across very different issues and experiences. While not everything can be blended into a lowest common denominator platitude, we can and must support the integrity of individual moments and the specificities of the community experience. An interdisciplinary approach that centralizes all key stakeholders' interests is increasingly necessary to understanding that not one stakeholder group will be able to sustain their self-interests if there is no planet off of which to work. It is time that we start viewing the planet and you and I as such stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you for working so hard to solve all those problems you just told us we have. I now feel really bad about taking ice cream from a styrofoam cup. So our next talk is actually not given by a live speaker again. This one's a bit longer, but a personal favorite of mine. It mixes comedy, information, and real issues in a fun but effective way. Please enjoy.
So, I'm an Iranian-American Muslim female, like all of you, and I'm also a social justice comedian, something that I insist is an actual job. Now, to explain what that is, let me tell you how I got here. I've performed all over the country, and let me tell you, America is majestic, right? It's got breathtaking nature, waffle houses, and diabetes as far as the eye can see. It is really something. Now, the American population can be broken up into three main categories. There's mostly wonderful people, haters, and Florida. Now, Besides Florida, the most troubling category here are the haters, okay? They are a minority, but they overcompensate by being extra loud. They have the Napoleon complex of demographics, and yes, some of the men do wear heels. Now, as a social justice comedian, it's my goal to convert these haters because they hate a lot of things which lead to negative outcomes, like racism, violence, and Ted Nugent. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm probably missing 3 to 7 items. But the point is, we have to reckon with the haters. But there's variance within this group, and it's not efficient to go after all of them, right? So what I've done is I've created a highly scientific taxonomy of haters. I basically took all of the haters, I put them in a petri dish like a scientist, and this is what I found. First off, we have the trolls. These are your garden variety digital haters. They're the people who have quit their jobs so that they can post on YouTube videos all day long. There's also the drive-by haters. Now, these people will be at a stoplight, they'll wait for the light to turn green, and when it does, they yell, "Go back to your own country." Now, back in the day, they would have actually gotten out of their cars and hated you to your face, but they just don't make them like they used to, which is another sign of the decline in America. Now, the next category is the mission-oriented bigot whose group affiliation gives them cover for hating hater. Now, these guys like to hate via a seemingly nice organization like a church or a nonprofit, and they oftentimes like to speak in an old-timey voice. But the group I'm most interested in is the swing hater. Now, the swing hater is sister to the swing voter, right? They just can't decide. They're like ideological sluts who move from hating to not hating, and they do it because they don't have enough information. And this is the group I like to target with social justice comedy. Now, why comedy? Because on a scale of comedy to brochure, the average American prefers comedy, as you can see from this graph. Comedy is very popular. And by the way, this is a mathematically accurate graph generated from fake numbers. Now, the question is, why does social justice comedy work? Well, because first off, it makes you laugh, right? And when you're laughing, you enter into a state of openness. And in that moment of openness, a good social justice comedian can stick in a whole bunch of information, and if they're really skilled, a rectal exam. Now, here are some ground rules for social justice comedy. First off, it's not partisan, okay? This isn't political comedy. This is about justice, and no one is against justice. 2, it's inviting and warm. It makes you feel like you're sitting inside of a burrito. 3, it's funny but sneaky. Like you could be hearing an interesting treatise on income inequality that's encased in a really sophisticated poop joke, right? Now, here's how I see social justice comedy working. Now, a few years ago, I rounded up a bunch of Muslim American comedians in a nonviolent way, and we went around the country to places like Alabama, Arizona, Tennessee, Georgia, places where they love the Muzzies, and we did stand-up shows, and we called the tour "The Muslims Are Coming." Now, we turned this into a movie, and then after the movie came out, a known hate group spent $300,000 on an anti-Muslim poster campaign with the MTA, that's the New York City subway system. Now, the posters were truly offensive, not to mention poorly designed. I mean, if you're going to be bigoted, you might as well use a better font. But we decided, why not launch our own poster campaign, right, that says nice things about Muslims while promoting the movie. So myself and fellow comedian Dean Obidala decided to launch the Fighting Bigotry with Delightful Posters campaign. We raised the money, worked with the MTA for over 5 months, got the posters approved, and then 2 days after they were supposed to go up, the MTA decided to ban the posters, citing political content. Let's take a look at a couple of those posters. Here's one. Facts about Muslims. Muslims invented the concept of a hospital. Okay. Fact. Grown-up Muslims can do more push-ups than baby Muslims. Fact. Muslims invented Justin Timberlake. Let's take a look at another one. The ugly truth about Muslims. They have great frittata recipes. Now, clearly, frittatas are considered political by the MTA. Either that, or the mere mention of Muslims in a positive light was considered political, but it isn't. It's about justice. So we decided to change our Fighting Bigotry with Delightful Posters campaign and turn it into the Fighting Bigotry with a Delightful Lawsuit campaign. So basically what I'm saying is a couple of dirtbag comedians took on a major New York City agency, and the comedians won. Yeah, thank you. you. Victory was a very weird feeling. I was like, is this what blonde girls feel like all the time? Because this is amazing. All right, here's another example. I'm asked everywhere I go, why don't Muslims denounce terrorism? We do, but okay, I'll take the bait. So I decided to launch thedailydenouncer.com. It's a website that denounces terrorism every day of the week while taking the weekends off. Let's take a look at an example. They generally appear as single panel cartoons. I denounce terrorism. I also denounce people who never fill the paper tray. The point of the website is that it denounces terrorism while recognizing that it's ridiculous that we have to constantly denounce terrorism. But if bigotry isn't your thing, social justice comedy is useful for all sorts of issues. For example, myself and fellow comedian Lee Camp went to the Cayman Islands to investigate offshore banking. Now, the United States loses something like $300 billion a year in these offshore tax havens. Not to brag, but at the end of every month, I have something like $5 to $15 in disposable income. So we walked into these banks in the Cayman Islands and asked if we could open up a bank account with $8.27. The bank managers would indulge us for 30 to 45 seconds, right, before calling security. Security would come out, brandish their weapons, and then we would squeal with fear and run away because, and this is the last rule of social justice comedy, sometimes it makes you want to take a dump in your pants. Now, most of my work is meant to be fun. It's meant to generate a connection and laughter. But yes, sometimes I get run off the ground by security. Sometimes I get mean tweets and hate mail. Sometimes I get voicemails saying that if I continue telling my jokes, they'll kill me and they'll kill my family. And those death threats are definitely not funny. But despite the occasional danger, I still think that social justice comedy is one of our best weapons. I mean, we've tried a lot of approaches to social justice, like war and competitive ice dancing. But still, a lot of things are still kind of awful. So I think it's time we try and tell a really good poop joke. Thank you.
And we're back to this room. No matter how many times I watch that, it still doesn't get any less funny or educational. Don't believe me? Search a highly scientific taxonomy of haters on YouTube or TED.com to watch it again. And no, they don't pay me to say that, but they should. Our next speaker is an interesting person. He's currently in his 10th year of being a classroom teacher, his 19th year of being a youth programming professional. Where I'm from, we call that a parent. Sorry. He is a Legacy Heritage Fund Teacher Leadership Fellow. That's also a lot of words. And is working on getting a Master's of Education from Brandeis University. He teaches social studies and history at Community Day School. He's a father of 2 sons who are significantly better at him than at Nerf battles. He almost overdosed on a whole bottle of Flintstone Kids vitamins when he was 6, and he has given this talk before, but angrily at my CDS social studies class. Please help me welcome the hilarious Chaim Steinberg.
Thank you. All right. I feel a little lost without a whiteboard behind me. I want to write things down to illustrate what I'm saying, but I have to go with the slides. So I'm really going to be talking to the young people in the room because old people get talked to all the time. In fact, there used to be this whole t-shirt campaign that said, "Don't trust anyone over 30." So I'm going to ask that for this case, you trust me on this. What really is the difference between young people and adults? Hold on. Okay. How to manage adults in 4 easy steps. What is the difference between young people and adults? Is it bank accounts, the ability to vote, driver's license, wisdom, life experience, height? I don't think that adults are necessarily smarter than kids, and I can imagine children doing a much better job voting than we have done recently. And right now I'm taller than many of you, but the older I get, the less likely that is to stay true. Now, what the difference is between you and I, between young people and old people, adults, I don't want to say everyone's old, is that society trusts us with agency. Agency is defined as the condition, the state of exerting power. Specifically, the idea that you can exert power over your own condition. As adults, we don't do a very good job trusting young people with agency. And as young people, you don't do a good job of taking it. So when I say that there are 4 easy steps to managing the adults in your life, I'm really saying there are 4 easy steps to taking back or reclaiming your agency. I'm a teacher. I like it. It's fun. I get to be the center of attention all the time. But one thing that frustrates me is that the people who make the laws in the country about teachers are almost never teachers. They tell me that I have to do this or that, or that we need to try and get these outcomes in the classroom, and they've never been in the classroom. And I say, how can you tell me what to do when you don't know what it is I actually do? My goals are not your goals. My priorities are not your priorities. And if I were a kid, if I were a young person, I would say that same thing. I would say, hold on, wait, just hold on. You're talking about the environment and healthcare and education and the budget and gerrymandering and all of these things. But honestly, you're going to be dead when we have to deal with them. I am the one who is going to have to deal with all of these. Your goals are not my goals. Your priorities are not my priorities. Your beliefs are not my beliefs. But your actions will lead to my consequences. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that young people are going to be given the chance to hold office anytime soon. So you're not going to be able to manage the country as possibly you should, because you'll be the inheritors of that country. So the best thing you can do is learn to manage the adults around you. And if you follow these 4 easy steps, you're not going to be able to force them to fulfill your own nefarious desires every single time. But over time, eventually, if you internalize these steps, you will find those grown-ups listening to what you have to say, ignoring you, if preferable, and generally thinking about whatever it is you have to suggest and giving it that second thought. So the first step I have to say to you is ask big questions. At my school, we have this thing called growth mindset. We talk about it a lot. It's awesome. Growth mindset is the approach to life that says it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to make a mistake. And in fact, whenever we make mistakes, and whenever we succeed because of or despite those mistakes, or come up with new solutions to those mistakes, that is when our brain does its best developing. But this is hard to get our minds around, because from a very young age, we are told, don't make mistakes. Don't get anything wrong. Don't stand out. If we don't know the answer, we are made to feel like a failure as a student, as a human being, and so we don't want to ever reach our hand up and risk looking dumb. But I have something to tell you about looking dumb. It's totally underrated. I've made a bit of a career of looking dumb. If you notice this tie and checkered shirt combination, that's just one of the most subtle, dumb-looking things I've done today. I think the other is to keep wrapping up this cord. I'm going to let that go. The other thing is that almost everybody forgets that you looked dumb. And in fact, later on, it gives you far more interesting stories. Far more interesting, time. So when you have that question, when you don't know what to say or you don't know what to think, ask. Because it does a couple of other things. One, you'll learn something shocking. If you don't ask, you're never going to learn. And secondly, it's like giving us a treat. It makes us feel good. They're like good adult. It's like throwing them a cookie and patting them on the head. And they're like, yeah, That's a smart kid. They asked me a question and listened to what I had to say. So next time you actually have a desire, you think of it as an investment. They're going to be like, oh, that kid totally asked me really great questions. Of course you can have an extension on your homework. You build up this habit of trust with the adults because they see you thinking. The next step is don't ask questions. But wait, you said ask questions. I know I said ask questions. And there are questions. There are, questions that push us to think, that make us ask, what is our place in the world? And then there are, questions. These are the questions you can answer for yourself, or really you shouldn't ask in public. Some of my favorite. Should I put my coat on? Well, I guess frostbite is an option if you would like to. Should I write my name on it? No, I just decided to type name with a line after it at the very top of the page just for fun. No, you have to put my name on it. Put somebody else's name on it. Anyway, of course. What are we doing? Parents know this one. But the problem is when people say, what are we doing? It is generally while I'm in the midst of giving instructions. Or, please what are we doing? Put your name on it. It's either in the middle of giving instructions or immediately afterwards. Like 30 seconds. Like really, immediately, like I just finished speaking. And the last one that really gets to me, is this right? Or is it good enough? Can you look at how I'm doing so far? I hate that question. I hate it. You know what I say? I don't know. Is it right? It's a total teacher thing. I don't know. Is it good enough? I don't know. Can I look at how you're doing so far? The problem with these questions is they tell me a couple of things generally. One is that you didn't read, or you didn't listen, or in a broader sense, you're not willing to make a decision for yourself. And the problem with that is when you refuse to make a decision for yourself, you are training us, the adults, to make those decisions for you. You are giving up your agency. But it is that last question, is this right? Am I good enough? That really gets to me because we're not willing to assess for ourselves. And there is so much fear in that question. Fear that I might get it wrong. So this leads me directly to the next step. Oh, that was a good picture. I should have clicked it earlier. Take a risk. Every adult, your parents, your teachers, random adults on the street, spend their lives wrapping you in bubble wrap, as they should. But there comes a point where you need to come out from under their arms and take a risk. The best assignments I have ever received from students were the product of taking a risk. They didn't say, hey, is this good enough? They didn't say, am I following the instructions? No, they just did the assignment knowing that if they failed, they did so gloriously and had fun doing it. They entered, as Teddy Roosevelt would say, the arena. Now, I am a social studies teacher, so if you thought you were going to get away with this without some story about Teddy Roosevelt, well, too bad. Teddy Roosevelt failed at a couple of things. He was such a bad rancher that literally all of his cattle froze to death. Like thousands of dollars of cattle just freezing. It was a horrible winter in Wyoming, but still. He did not succeed as a father. He gave up his oldest daughter to be raised by his sister immediately after she was born. He did not completely cleanse the New York State Assembly in Albany of all the corruption, but he tried. However, he was unwilling to not try. He never said, well, this might be too hard. He said, it is not the critic who counts. It is not the person who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends themselves in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and this is my favorite part, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly. So at this, their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Did you know he once held the record for 70 years for the most handshakes in a morning? 8,513. Whoops. I know, he used to stand up and shake everybody's hand. New Year's, 1907. All right, so history teacher part aside. I've always said it is better to fail spectacularly than barely win. And so I exhort you at this point in your life, young people, do not content yourself with small, safe victories. Instead, challenge yourself for those glorious defeats that lead to even more spectacular wins. And finally, number 4. What happens on the playground stays on the playground. Please stop telling us things. Stop. Just stop. And it's not unreasonable. We do spend our time raising you to trust adults, which you should. If you are sad or upset or somebody is picking on you or you need help, trust us. Come to us. Absolutely. But there are things you need to stop telling us, and that is hard because we live in a world where the public space exists so vastly. This digital public space of Instagram and Snap, not Snapchat, but Snap, Facebook and Twitter. We want to share everything we do with everyone around us. But sometimes boundaries are good because you as young people will do stupid things, and we as adults will bust you for them, and if we don't, then we're actually not doing our job. So I have a couple of examples of times when perhaps kids should not have spoken, or chose not to speak, and in fact, were quite successful as a result. Number 1. This happens so often. Steinberg, someone comes into my classroom, I didn't do my homework. And I always say the exact same thing. And if you asked any of my students, they would tell you exactly what I say. And I would say, why are you telling me this? Because now that you've told me this, I have to mark down that you haven't done your homework when there is a completely reasonable chance that I would have forgotten completely. That I assigned it, that I needed to collect it, what we were talking about. Barring that, and you need to understand, this is not, class is starting. This is 2 or 3 hours before class has started. Barring that, there are 2 other options. I continue to saying this. I would say, in the next, 2.5 hours before we have class, do your homework. And barring that, worst case scenario, as class begins, distract me, which is really easy to do, and quickly copy your friend's homework. Now, I need to say, caveat here, one person's problem solving is another person's cheating. So, if you choose to pursue that avenue, know which teachers you are, know which teachers to target that at. Because while some may respect your quick problem solving ability, others will write you up. And that's on you, because part of agency is actually taking responsibility for whatever it is you do. The second great example of not telling adults too much happened when I was 20 years old. I was a counselor at a summer camp. I was in charge of a dozen boys between between the grades of 9th and 10, so they're about 14 years old. And I'm not going to tell you what they did. Maybe privately. But I come out of my tent one day, and we lived in tents in the woods, and I look down. In front of me, there's a Ziploc bag full of candy. Oh, it's so nice. And on that bag is a distinctly anti-authoritarian statement written in Sharpie. I find out that all of the tents in what was called the village, where all of the 9th and 10th graders lived, had equally received this bounty of candy, but mine was the only staff tent. And I come out, and immediately the boys are like, Chaim, guess what we did? I'm like, stop! Don't talk. I don't want to know, because I know that whatever it is you tell me, I'm actually going to make the responsible decision. So don't tell me now. Tell me on final night. They told me on final night, and needless to say, it was one of those camp adventures that really only happens in movies. None of those boys were welcome back to camp the next summer, but it was epic. The last example of a time where a student did not tell the adult too much was a student of mine who once said at the end of the school year, I think I spent more time out of the dress code than in the dress code this year. She had never called attention to herself or publicized the fact or been like, hey, notice anything wrong with my uniform? Which other kids have done. No, instead this student just cruised along, didn't make waves, till the end of the year when I realized I really need to pay more attention to what the dress code says. So what does all of this have to do with improving the experience of young people? At the end of the day, the person you can most rely on to advocate for you is you. Adults will think that you are too young, you are too inexperienced, that you just don't get it, until you prove them wrong. My job is to teach you. It is to take care of you. It is to make sure that you don't die. Your job is to prove to me that you have learned something, that you can take care of yourself, and if released into the wild, you can cross the street safely. The only person who can give you agency is you. And until you learn to not manipulate, until you can learn to manage the grown-ups in your life, until you learn to reclaim that agency, you are never going to grow up. And adults, that goes for you too, but that's a whole other talk altogether. Thank you.
Great job. Trust me though, it's a lot better on a TED stage than it is getting yelled at you. Our next and last speaker is pretty mind-boggling. She founded the performance consulting firm Rewrite 365, and she is usually a keynote speaker and a workshop leader. She wants to create a world, which fits right in with our theme, where there is no fear of failure or rejection, and do-overs are welcomed. She discovered that fear of being or doing something wrong places limitations on us that shouldn't and don't have to be there. She wants to empower kids who will become empowered adults. She wants to show everyone that power comes from within. And whenever she travels, she finds the best cupcakes and pancakes in an area and has to try them. Please help me welcome the uplifting Unica J.
November the 27th, 2001. It was a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday after Thanksgiving. It was a phenomenal day. I had the opportunity to start a new job. It was my second day on the job. How exciting is that? I'm sitting at my desk, and my assistant came in. I had ignored a couple calls on my phone. And she came in and she said, Unica, one of your children is on line 1. I think you need to take it. He sounds a little upset. And I said, well, they're always upset because they want to know which lunch meat they should use, or they want to know if they can eat the Twinkies, or what's going to be for dinner, or they want to tell me about one hitting the other. They're always upset. And she said, no, this time I think that you should take this call. Pick up the phone, and my 10-year-old son, Isaiah, is on the other line, and he's sobbing. And quickly I knew that something was different about this call. This wasn't about Oscar Mayer. This wasn't about something that may have happened on the playground. This wasn't about his friends or someone bothering him. But this phone call was serious. In between his sobs, I said, honey, I need you to get it together. I need you to tell me what's going on. I used my big corporate voice on him, right? And I said, I need you to tell me exactly what's wrong. And he paused, and he said, Mommy, Nana is dead. And I sat there because I wasn't expecting those words to come from my 10-year-old son. I mean, Nana should be in the kitchen cutting the crust off of your peanut butter and jelly sandwich right about now. Who told you that she was dead? And he said, I'm looking at her. And I said, well, how do you know that she's dead? He said, Mommy, she's cold. And I said, well, hold on for just a second. See, this is where all the type A personality comes in handy. I said, hold on for just a second. I want you to pause. I want you to calm down. I want you to grab your 7-year-old brother, and I want you to go over 2 houses, and I want you to tell them that you've talked to me and that you need to stay there, and I'm on my way. November the 27th of 2001. You would think that that particular moment would have been the shifting moment in my life. But it wasn't the call. It wasn't coming home to the house and finding my forever best friend, the first person I ever knew, the person whose heartbeat I learned from the inside of her womb, lying on the floor, lifeless at 51 years old from a heart attack. You would have thought that that would have shifted everything. But that wasn't the moment. It was the moment at her funeral where they said to me as the oldest child, we need you to come up and we'd like for you to close the casket. And I thought, wow, this is a lot. You guys are asking a lot of me, but I can do this. And I stand up and I walk up to the casket. I put my hand up and I start to pull it down. And as the casket is going down, as I'm pulling down that lid for my final goodbye to my mother, I thought about everything that she said she was going to do. All of the dreams that she had. All of the goals that she had that were now trapped inside of this casket. And then there was a click. That casket is forever closed. Pallbearers lift it up. They take it out to a hearse. They put the person in there. They take you to the funeral home, to the cemetery. They drop you into a 6-foot hole. And in that hole goes your dreams, your aspirations, and your goals. I want to talk to you today about a life without limits. Because when I think about my mother, I know that she lived her life full of limits. Everything was a limit. Money was a limit. Being a single mother was a limit. Poverty was a limit. Living in the ghetto was a limit. All of these different things were a limit to her. Not having an education was a limit. And so she made her decisions in life based on her limits opposed to possibilities. I want to talk to you today about a life without limits. Fear gripped her most of her life. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of success. Kept her from stepping out and doing the things that she was called to do in the earth. Living a life without limits. It was that click that made me make a decision that I would always seize each and every opportunity that came my way. That if I was called to create in the earth, then I would create. If I was called to speak in the earth, then I would speak. If I was called to love in the earth, then I would love. The challenge that we have as adults is we place limits on our children. We place limits because of our own fears, because I think about all of the things that my mother said to me, all of the things that she told me that instilled fear in me that would make me live a life that was full of limits. And then I listen to myself tell my children the same thing. Oh, you don't want to do that. Don't play football, because if you play football, then you might get hurt. If you get hurt, then I'm going to cry, and then I have to pay this huge copay, and none of us want that. So let's not play football. But those fears we're putting into our children, and they're receiving them because they're empty vessels that were designed to be placed in the earth to do magnificent things. I want to talk to you about living a life without limits. Fear of rejection. What will they say? Will they accept me? Is my idea good enough? Am I called to do this? Was I created for this? Is it the time for this? What if everyone turns away from me? What will I do? Do it anyway. Who cares what they think? Who cares what they say? It is your time, and it's time for you to do the things that you were created to do. Fear of failure. We all have to fail at some time. But I don't even think that when you fail that it's a failure. I think it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to think, how can I do this differently the next time? The next time I create, the next time I invent. Think for just a moment if Steve Jobs would have been gripped with fear of rejection and failure and decided to never create the iPhone. I mean, like, how would I have a playlist now? How would I be able, at my fingertips, be able to talk to thousands of people on Facebook? How would I be able to fit this little computer in my back pocket that I can pick up, take selfies, do all of these things? He didn't have that fear. He knew that he had to live a life without limits. And now his thought process, his creations, his inventions is making our life better because he was limitless. And we have to be limitless. And we have to create that limitless mindset for our children. When they want to do something, they want to step out the box and they want to try something different, encourage them. When they fall down, pick them back up and say, you know what? You may not have done a good job this time. It may not have worked out the way that you wanted it to, but it's time for you to go forth and try it again. I believe that you should do it over and over again until you get it right based on what your definition of right is. Encourage them to think freely. Encourage them to share, to use their voice. And lastly, a fear of success. Sometimes we can be so afraid. We're so used to failing. When I think back about my mother and I think about the life that she had, when I think about the challenges that she faced in her life, failure after failure after failure after failure, disappointment after disappointment. She didn't know what success looked like. So she wouldn't step out in order to get success because she had no idea, what does that mean? Because sometimes our failure can become our story. It can become our badge of honor. People get together, they have failure parties. They go on failure getaways. They have, they get together and they talk about all the times that they failed, and it becomes the way that you resonate with people. But it's time to stop having failure parties and start stepping into success parties. It's time for us to say, okay, you know what? There's a special call that's on my life. There's something that I'm created to do in this earth that only I can do. There are people that are waiting to hear my voice, to use my invention, to come to my company. There are people that are here in this earth that are waiting on me, and failure and fear cannot stop me. I want to talk to you about living a life without limits. When you're living without limits, you'll step up and do the things that you would never do. When you're living without limits, you love without limits. You walk without limits. You talk without limits. You go without limits. Nothing can contain you when you're living without limits. Nothing can hold you back from the dream that's inside of you. That symphony that only plays when you're doing the thing that you were created to do. Funny thing about adults. Adults will stay in jobs longer than they need to or want to, and they'll hate that job. Why do they stay? Fear. How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to do this? If I walk away from this job, how am I going to do what I need to do for my family? I've been all the way up the ranks in corporate America. And I made the decision 18 months ago to step into a place that I was afraid of. And I walked away from my job and started my own firm. Because I believe that if I'm living my life without limits, then the things that are important will be supplied. If I'm walking in that place that I'm supposed to be in, then every need will be met. If I recognize that I am not my own source, then everything else will be taken care of. And I walked away from that job. And I gotta tell you, everyone thought I was crazy. My father thought I should come home. We should have a conversation, that maybe he needed to coach me, that clearly this child has not quit the job that everyone wants. Yes, I quit. I gave it all up. Why? Because staying in that job was safe. Staying in that job could put limits on my life. And staying in that job would put me in a position where I probably wouldn't even be standing in front of you today. Because I'd be worried about a spreadsheet, EBITDA, profit margin, shareholders. Something would be plaguing my mind this Sunday evening, because tomorrow I would probably have to talk to a board member. I want to talk about a life without limits. If a symphony is not going off inside of you every day, then you're not living a limitless life. If you are not filled with joy and compassion and love and ecstatic about what you're doing, you're not living a limitless life. You have allowed fear to creep in and tell you everything that you couldn't be. But it's time for you to think about not only the legacy that is of a monetary value that you'll hand down to your children, but that legacy that is without fear, a legacy that tells them that they can do whatever it is that they feel they're called to do on the earth, that there's nothing that can stop them, that they should not be afraid, that they should go forth, that they should use their voice to make this world a better place. It's time for us to live a limitless life where there are no boundaries around us, where everything that we want we can possess, that we can step into it, and that we can do it. Don't let the click come before you step into your limitless life. Live that life now. Say goodbye to fear. Say goodbye to doubt. Say goodbye to unbelief. And stand firmly in your authentic self, doing what you know you were created to do in the earth. Buy the shoes. Eat the peach cobbler. Eat the dressing, or the stuffing as some people may call it. Jump out of an airplane. Create the thing that's inside of you. Write the book. Start the business. Do the thing so that your life can be limitless. Because once that click comes, it's all over. You don't get a second opportunity. My mother never, ever got to do a lot of the things that were on her list, the dreams that were inside of her. I believe that she pressed pause on that symphony early on, and she never pressed play again. But I stand here now that even though she didn't transfer that legacy to me on purpose, she transferred it to me through a lesson. And I make sure that this symphony is playing all the time. Live your life limitlessly and let your symphony play for the whole world to hear.
So that was really great. As were all of the talks. We are kind of done, but not really. Wait, what? It's a laser. Whoa. I feel like a cat. Sorry. Thanks to the sponsors again. Speaking of thank yous, I am actually going to do something that I really enjoy. I really enjoy watching history videos on YouTube. And something that they do, thank you, Mr. Steinberg, and something that they do sometimes is they explain a huge historical event in a very short amount of time. And I'm going to try one of those with my long list of thank yous. You guys ready? Let's see if I can do this. Thank you to all of our sponsors, Jen Carl for all of the things, Monica Hertzman for the programs, David Bovers for all of the technical support, Haggerty Media for recording and live streaming this, Clint Bennett from the Three Rivers Entertainment Company, Jake Canodia for the name tags and mentorship, Ron Simons for securing one of our biggest sponsors, Marianne Leon for being one of the best fiscal agent a 13-year-old could ask for, Jen Primack and Marissa Bovers for creating the projector screen, Christine Sorensen and Pittsburgh Today Live for publicizing this event, Larry Berger and the Saturday Light Brigade for hosting me on the radio show, Jess Ponce for speaker coaching, Lydia Bestel from Repair the World, Laura Schneiderman and the Post-Gazette for publicizing the event as well. Thanks to all of my friends and family for putting up with the TEDx 24/7 and all of the help and support. Thanks to all of you for coming, and last, because it's the most important, thanks to all of our volunteers. We could not have done this without you. Thank you very much. That was fun. I would recommend trying that. Okay, so we're going to try something because we're super ahead of schedule. We're going to invite all of the speakers up who are still here to do a general Q&A. So yeah, welcome all of speakers. Thank you. Okay, so I understand that a lot of people left earlier because it's been a long day, but do any of the people still here have any general questions or specific questions for the people that are on the stage? Seeing as we do not have any right now, I actually have a personal question. And that question is, what made you crazy enough to decide you wanted to do the talks today? Would you like to start?
I don't know if it's as much as crazy. I am so impressed by you, by what the power that you exude. Like, you are amazing, absolutely amazing. And if I could have the opportunity to serve you, then I'm going to jump on that because you're doing some phenomenal things.
I think along the same lines, it's not a joke to run a TEDx conference, no matter how big it is. And when we founded TEDx CMU, we were a team of like 20 people. And he sold more tickets than we did. CMU has 12,000 students. We couldn't sell 80 tickets. He sold 87 in like 2 months, and that's incredibly amazing. So round of applause for that.
Hello. How it works. I feel like the reason why I was crazy enough to do this was because I feel like it's important to get my word out and to meet new people and hear their stories. And yeah.
Those know me know that I'm already crazy, so I probably couldn't attest more to that, but Nadav, you've been an inspiration. If a 13-year-old can lead an event like this, a 20-year-old should be able to speak for about 10 minutes. So that's why.
I actually found out about this like 3 hours before the application was due. So I didn't really have time to think it through. I was like, I can give a speech. I've done that before. It wasn't quite that easy, but so yeah.
Ego. Totally. If Nadav's gonna do something, you better believe I'm gonna convince him to let me speak.
I have a lot of mentors who are in their early 20s because I work with college students and high school students. And so I have a lot of people who have taught me so much in my life. And when a 13-year-old, I got on the phone with him and realized this kid is one of the smartest people I know, not the smartest kid. Like, he's so interesting and smart. And when I told him my idea to create a better world, he reflected it back to me in a much more articulate way. I was like, I think I'll go with some of those ideas. Nadav, that sounds pretty good.
I wanted an opportunity to come to the States, come to Pittsburgh and see Pittsburgh, and to participate in this awesome event that I knew that you were putting on. It's a nice chance for me. I give a lot of presentations, but I don't usually give them in this style. So it's great to find a way for me to bring my message in a little shorter and to try a new speech that I haven't given before.
Mr. Allison also used this as an excuse to get by border security. So that's an interesting story for another time. So any questions from the audience? Yeah? Oh, question for me. Okay, I was not prepared for this. So I wanted to do kind of like what Kate said. I wanted to do a TED event, having no idea what that entailed. I had just recently been to TEDx CMU, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And my mother also spoke at that, and she was in the picture that he showed. It's like, that's pretty cool. I should do that. And then I was like, what does that mean, though? And then, by the time I actually realized what that means, I was in too deep to get out. So, and now you have this. So we are going to wrap this up. Thank you all very much for coming. Are there food trucks still outside? Yeah, there are food trucks still outside. Get some food on your way out. But remember, be sustainable with the food. Yeah? Did I use that right? Oh yeah, and also pick up your garbage, please. I'm gonna have to do that, and I don't want to. So. Yeah. And glitter. Clean that up, please. Okay. Thank you all. Have a great night. Oh, yeah. Picture.
Picture?
One more picture. They want another picture. Yes, we've had so many. Kiva.